The regularly scheduled city council meeting, Tuesday, December 3rd, 6 p.m. We will have the invocation led by Wes Harding, who's here from the Bridge Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Council Member Brand. All please rise.
Mayor, council members, happy Thanksgiving. Very thankful to be in this community. Thank you for allowing prayer to go in these chambers. I know it matters here, and I know it matters in our community a lot. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this community. We have a special community who cares for one another and especially cares for our children and our future. Thank you so much for our public servants and elected officials, our city administration, our first responders, and those people who make everything run smoothly. Thank you for them because you know who they are. And Father, thank you for your protection over our daily lives and the lives of our families. Encourage us today in this meeting to have to be open to other ideas and beliefs, and to be respectful of those of our differences and not to be threatened by them. May we grow in our understanding of our own motives, knowing that often it's out of our fear that we present things. So Lord, let us work towards the common good of El Segundo. Let us work towards a mighty future that will be a quality city for the community today and our children of the future. We ask this in your name. Amen. Please say with me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Harding, and thank you, Dr. Brand. We are fortunate to have several presentations this evening. First up, we have a new police officer joining the ranks, so I think we're going to hear from Captain Bermudez. Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Jaime Bermudez. I'm a police captain with the police department. I'm here on behalf of Chief Whalen, and I'm excited to introduce our newest police officer, Patrick Sloey. Very exciting times for the police department. We're fully staffed. I know the chief is very excited about that, and I wanted to make sure that everyone here knew that. We've been working on that for quite a few years, so we're finally there. A little bit about Patrick Sloey. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Wait, Captain, before you go on, thanks for that reminder. How many years has it been since we've been fully staffed, roughly?
Oh, it's a couple years, at least 3-4 years.
Okay, I've been telling everyone like 10, so I've been I've been wrong on that.
It's a big goal of ours, so when you say that, it shouldn't be just brushed over. It's a big achievement for us to have attained that level that we're budgeted for and expected, so that's huge. And I
Yes.
think it's this council that gave the ability to do that. You asked for a marketing firm. You asked for a lateral bonus. You asked for a good contract with the POA. The council delivered all those things, and apparently it's worked. It took time, but it's worked, and so we really celebrate that, because the main thing the people in El Segundo want is the police officers in their neighborhoods. And when they see the cars and they see the numbers, it makes a huge difference. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's worth saying. Thank you very much. Thank you for the support. It's worked. So introducing Patrick Sloey, a little bit about him. He's a local officer. He grew up here in the city of Redondo Beach, went to El Camino College, then he transferred to San Diego State. He graduated there in 2011 with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. He's a lateral officer from the Los Angeles Police Department. He's been there since January 2012. His assignments at LAPD include Harbor Division, West LA Division, Newton Division, Pacific Division, and he also worked 2 details, which was the undercover auto theft detail and gang enforcement detail. So we're getting an officer with a lot of experience, and we're excited about that, definitely. One other thing that really demonstrates the quality candidates that we're getting He's received over 52 commendations by the Los Angeles Police Department. He received the LAPD Unit Merit Citation Award, and he also received the Department Commendation Ribbon. His hobbies include going to concerts, playing the drums, and as much as I hate to say this as a Dodger fan, he is an avid Anaheim Angels fan and a Ducks fan. So, Patrick, welcome to the city. Welcome to the police department. Come on up. All right. If you want to say a couple things, the floor is yours.
City Council, Mayor, just want to say I'm excited and humbled at this opportunity to work for such a great police department and a great city.
Welcome. We're glad to have you. Let's do a photo real quick, shall I?
Thank you.
Yeah, I hate having this in the picture. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, they grew up down the street from me. His cousin's initials are BMW. Brian Michael Williamson.
All right, next up we have a proclamation related to the annual holiday parade this Sunday, December 8th. And I think Mayor Pro Tem is going to read this.
Yes. So, proclamation by the City of El Segundo in California, whereas the El Segundo Chamber of Commerce has given El Segundo the annual parade for the past 56 years, a tradition which both celebrates El Segundo and calls forth the holiday season. And whereas the parade to be held this Sunday, December 8th, 2019, from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., with the theme of Toyland, will assemble on the corner of Imperial Avenue and Main, and continue down Main Street, disbanding at El Segundo Boulevard. And whereas the parade will start with the Grand Marshal and end with the traditional grand finale, the Chevron fire truck, bringing Santa Claus through downtown El Segundo, and between the crowds will be treated with a few surprises. Now, therefore, the mayor and members of the City Council of the City of El Segundo, California, do hereby proclaim Sunday, December 8th, 2019, as the 56th Annual El Segundo Holiday Parade, and invite the community to all the traditional El Segundo holiday events, and wish the Chamber of Commerce and many more years of marching down Main Street. And Marcia Hansen from the Chamber is going to accept this award.
Thank you, Mayor Boyles, Mayor Pro Tem Perstek, members of the council. On behalf of the chamber, we would like to thank you for your support of the 56th Annual Holiday Parade. You said the theme this year is Toyland, celebrating the rich history of toys in El Segundo, not to mention Barbie's 60th birthday. We want to thank our generous sponsors and all the volunteers who make this event possible every year. The City of El Segundo and your fabulous team, Jackie Day and everyone at Parks and Rec have been great working with. We appreciate that. Chevron, they do so much for the parade. And, of course, they'll be out on the route this year with their candy canes and magnets. They're highly coveted magnets. Mattel Toys, you're going to see some Hot Wheels, giant-size Hot Wheels cars out there. Edco, of course, we need our trash services and our porta potties, so we're grateful for their support. Natural Simplicity, Prager Metis, International Garden Center, and El Segundo Brewing Company, who is the official after-party spot of the 56th Annual Holiday Parade. We hear that Santa is heading this way soon from the North Pole, and this is one of the biggest parades we ever had. We have close to 75 plus entries, so it's a big parade, and we are very, very excited. Some brand new entries this year, so it's very, very exciting. Lots of Huskies and Malamutes and a giant hot dog, and it's going to be awesome. So we want to invite the entire community out to join us on Main Street this Sunday from 1 to 3. to show Santa what a great community we have. It will happen rain or shine, so let's all pray for some beautiful sunshine at Chamber of Commerce Day this Sunday. We thank you all, and while I'm at it, I want to remind everyone this Thursday, of course, down the tree lighting, which I know you'll talk about, is also our downtown holiday open house from 5:30 to 8:30. There's going to be we'll be putting this out on the social media sites, on the Parents Network. We have several businesses participating in our Elf on the Shelf scavenger hunt, and it's going to be a really fun evening in downtown El Segundo this Thursday as well. So check out our website and all the good Facebook pages. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Marcia. All right, next we have Councilman Pimentel. Oh, sorry.
Okay, we're done.
All right, we have Councilman Pimentel. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Chamber. Thank you, Chevron. Councilman Pimentel is going to read the annual tongue twister, which is the Candy Cane Lane Proclamation. So, Chris, take it away.
Whereas great and wonderful events are many times the inspiration of one person, like Ken Bailey, whose simple idea that a decorated tree be placed at the end of the cul-de-sac on the 1200 block of East Acacia in celebration of a neighborhood Christmas in 1949, is, 70 years later, an annual holiday tradition in El Segundo worthy of national media coverage and known as Candy Cane Lane. Whereas Candy Cane Lane features Santa Claus arriving on top of a horn-blowing El Segundo fire engine to light the beautifully decorated homes on Candy Cane Lane as he makes his way in his sleigh in a Christmas village situated at the end of the cul-de-sac, from which he sends good cheer each year for 10 nights this year to thousands of boys and girls, residents, and tourists. And whereas homes, yards, and magnolia trees are brightly decorated, the El Segundo Community Band plays, and property owners dress up their homes for all the oohs and ahs and the tradition of Candy Cane Lane. A few good merry men of Candy Cane Lane have given their merry ho-ho-hos year after year in the Santa suit donated by Chevron. A big thanks to Spring Cleaners for generously making sure that Santa's suit is sparkling for the season. The El Segundo Police Department RSVPs and El Segundo High School ASB volunteers make sure that the crowds maneuver down the lane in a safe and orderly fashion. And whereas, lest we forget, we herein list the names of the folks that are synonymous with Candy Cane Lane. The Iris, the Hoods, the Esdens, Sales, McEwens, Warwicks, Moores, Turnbulls, McCulloughs, de Lambertys, the Guidon and Stretch, and Ruperts, Mitchells, Gons, Hudspeths, Harts, Dukakases, Brennenkants, Phillip, and Stosser, and Jetto, the Leeks, the Kales, the Wongs, the Schlenderings, the Stenbachens, and the Hawks. Now therefore, on this third day of December 2019, the mayor and members of the City Council of the City of El Segundo, California, proclaim the 1200 block of East Acacia Avenue as Candy Cane Lane from December 14, 2019 at 7 p.m. through December 23, 2019, and invite the young and young at heart to experience the wonders of this El Segundo holiday tradition.
He can do that every year, as far as I'm concerned.
All right, Chris, you're missing your calling. All right, next up we have an announcement regarding the Young Americans. Cara Baldino.
Hi, my name is Cara Baldino, and I am here to talk about the Young Americans. Right, so the Young Americans are singers and dancers that tour the world, and they stop in El Segundo every January since 2002. We're pretty lucky to have them. The dates that they're going to be here this year are January 10th through 13th, and primarily while they're here, they're producing a performing arts workshop for kids in grades 3rd grade through 12th grade, and the whole thing is done at El Segundo High School, so it's nice and local. And see what else. Sign-ups now. If you know any children who would like to be involved in this, the sign-ups are now at youngamerican.org. The cost of the workshop is $75 per student, but we have scholarships available. When you register online, you can apply for it. And one of my main purposes being here tonight, other than telling you about the workshop, which continues to come back every year, the tour that comes back, is that I'd like to invite the community and the council to come see the show. Because these performers, it's like having a little Broadway cast in El Segundo for a weekend. They are amazing singers and dancers, and frankly, they're too young to know it, I feel like. they don't make any money. They're performing because they're going to college, and they love singing and dancing, and they love teaching, but they don't even understand how talented they are. And they're here, and they share all their talent with our kids and with the community. So you get to see this amazing show. $12 for adults, $10 for children, tickets, and then at the end of they do an hour show. And after their show, the children perform that they've been working with all weekend, and that's amazing too. It's such an uplifting show. So I highly encourage the community and the council to check it out. The 2 show times will be Sunday, January 12th at 5 p.m., and then a second show on Monday, January 13th at 6 p.m. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Baldino. Great program. All right, thanks for that. Next up, we have Chevron presenting on fence line monitoring. I see Mr. Spackman. Welcome.
Mayor Bowles, members of the council, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. Some time back, we chatted briefly about the system that we were installing at the time in conjunction with a rule that was passed by the AQMD a couple of years ago. Really, in the sense that although it's a new system for us, it doesn't change what we've been doing historically at the facility. We've always had what we call emission monitoring systems on all of our major heaters and boilers. Those are systems that continuously monitor our emissions, and they provide real-time data to the district. This is the next step in the evolution of that process. It's a system that now rings the perimeter of the refinery and provides real-time data that any individual can go look up, if you will, on a website pretty much in real time. So I'm going to step out of the way, and I'm going to let a couple of people who have been heavily involved in the process kind of walk you through, in simple terms, what's in play now, what we've been working on for the past year and a plus. Again, this system, the one thing I'll say is this system is a monitoring system for criteria pollutants primarily. It's not intended to be an emergency response system. It wasn't designed for that purpose, and it certainly isn't intended for that purpose. But they'll give you a good sense of it. So I'm going to let Jeff Wilson, who worked with me, and then also Sean Graham, who's in our HES group, Health, Environment, and Safety group, kind of walk you through that process and kind of where we are today. Jeff?
Thank you, boss. Thank you, Mayor Boyles, member of the council. How are you this evening? Appreciate this. And first of all, too, just want to take a few seconds and thank your city staff and your public safety agencies for all the work that we have ongoing and collaborating at the chief's request and throughout the course of the last several months. We know there's a lot of interest in this new technology, and again, can't thank you, Chief, enough, and your folks as well. So wanted to just take a couple seconds and walk through what this is. If we go to the first slide, so as Rod talked about 2 years ago, the South Coast Air Quality Management District, which is the public health agency stewarding the air quality regulations in the LA Basin, passed Rule 1180, and that puts in place for all refineries in the South Coast Basin a network of air monitors ringing the refinery. We're very proud of the fact at Chevron we worked collaboratively with the district in the rules development and in the rules passing. This was not something we opposed, and in fact, it's nothing new for the facility. As Rod talked about, in addition to our continuous emission monitoring systems, or SEMS, we have on our major process units, you may be familiar with our eye in the sky. We have a thermal imaging camera that we put in proactively several years ago. It sweeps about 1,500 meters of the facility, and in addition, for several years, we've had canisters along the perimeter of the facility that monitor for what we call benzene. So nothing new, as Rod said, it's just a progression of what we're going to talk about as state of the art. We're also proud of the fact that we are the first facility with the AQMD that submitted a plan and had our plan approved. So again, we took this very seriously, and we've been very collaborative in working through the rules development. What's going to take place is we will have a system of 13 open path monitors and 12 point source monitors that will be reporting in near real time 17 different air constituents. I just want to highlight that we do not utilize hydrofluoric acid, or what's referred to as MHF, as 2 of our competitor facilities in the basin do. So we are not required to utilize that. There's been much, quite frankly, in the news lately about the use of HF in facilities, and we have never used it at the Chevron El Segundo refinery. We will not use it at the El Segundo refinery, so it is not one of the constituents that's going to be monitored. And very important here too is this is state of the art. This does not exist to this extent anywhere else in the world. And the instrumentation and monitoring equipment will detect down to the lowest detectable scientific limits. So this is really pressing the envelope from a technology and science standpoint. Well in advance of our plan submittal, we brought a one-of-a-kind mobile monitoring truck from the East Coast, and we spent several weeks piloting this new system to maximize the placement and the design of our monitoring instrumentation, and also very importantly studying the meteorological conditions, because wind is a very important parameter when we look at the placement that we'll talk about as well. But the van you see on the left, we brought all the way in from the East Coast. We moved it around inside the plant. We did a pretty significant technology study and assessment before we put our plan before the AQMD for approval. And to give you a little bit of idea of what this technology looks like, and Sean, my colleague here, has been fundamental in having a whole team of technology experts within the company. There's basically what we call analyzers and reflectors, and we're going to depict what that looks like and what the public can see from our fence line. But basically, an analyzer beams light across a span of about 500 meters along the fence line. It hits a reflector, and it returns back to the analyzer. And within that spectrum of light, the air constituents are actually measured, decoded, and then moved to the website for depiction. In addition to the open path monitors, we also have single point analyzers that have a capability to detect some of the different constituents that are better monitored from a single point. We're going to show a map what that looks like here in a second. But again, this is state of the art, down to the lowest detectable scientific limits for any one of these constituents. If you take a look at the left, you can see there was pretty significant. This is not inconsequential. And from if you're driving down El Segundo Boulevard and you look into our parking lot just to the north of the main office, you'll see, and I don't know if I have it, but you'll see one of these, what we kind of call our, looks like a clubhouse or a tree house. And these are the analyzer stations that house the equipment for the beams. And if you look then, nearly all of the perimeter of the refinery is being ringed now by these open path systems. So you can see here's El Segundo Boulevard, Sepulveda, and Rosecrans. And the analyzer will beam, reflect, and it'll go back. And within those different locations is where the data readings will take place. Just to highlight too, all the refineries in Southern California are complying with Rule 1180. And just to give you a little example of what some of our other competitor refineries are doing, these are depictions of what their plans look like. What I didn't mention, though, there's also a network of community monitoring stations that are going in, not only in the perimeter of the proximity of the refineries in the basin, but actually all throughout the state of California under what's called AB 617. And there is a legislation that is looking at various sources and cumulative sources of pollution burden on largely communities of high density in the ports and the Inland Empire surrounding warehouses. But we expect too that there will be a community monitoring station both in the city of El Segundo and in the city of Manhattan Beach. Okay. So the monitoring data is going to be available on a new website. And the data will be available 24/7. And for the Chevron El Segundo website, that will be elsegundo1180.com. But it will also be available at the South Coast Air Quality Management District's website at seaqmd.org. And the websites are going to be providing information about the constituents that are being monitored, how they relate to the refinery and the refining processes, how they may occur naturally and in other consumer products and uses outside of the refinery. Also, there will be concentration levels that will be depicted against what the average concentration levels are on a daily basis in the South Coast Air Quality Management Basin. The take-home here is we understand the communication elements of this new website and what the public will be, what the data will be depicting is very important. And we've been working very collaboratively again with the district in helping make sure and shape communication tools so it's easy to understand, but also that if the public does have questions, there's many different elements where they can seek answers. So the website will have an interactive component where the members of the public can ask questions, okay, on a web inquiry, but there will also be a call line that will house 24/7. So people that have a question on something that they can pick up the phone and call. Of course, always you can call the AQMD, but having the ability to seek questions on something that could initially be daunting or confusing was very, very important to us. And Rod and I have been working with the executive officer of their air district, and they've been seeking a lot of public input on this. So as well, thresholds have been established for each one of the constituents. According to state 1 hour, what's called 1 hour REL limits that establish short-term health-based standards. And if a threshold has been temporarily exceeded, right on our homepage, there will be a depiction that will help identify the location of the path, that there might be something being detected, the level that it is being detected, and what the constituent is. And the homepage then will also very readily indicate when monitoring data no longer has any type of exceedance. And if you take a look at the homepage, what it's going to look like for individuals that just want to do a quick check, it will always be highlighted in green. All compounds are below notification thresholds. And again, most important is any questions that the public may have, residents can make inquiries via the website, and once the site is launched, we will have a 24/7 call center where people can make inquiries. Just real quick too, over the past several years, the district's had many public workshops and work group meetings and the rule developed for public input, both on our plan and those of our other refineries. And there will be 2 new upcoming sessions that will take place. One's going to take place on December 5 in Carson at the Carson Community Center, and on December 12 here in El Segundo at the Jocelyn Center. So good opportunity for more information to be developed, but all the previous public workshop data is available and information on the district's website. And of course, as always, members of the community, if they ever have questions about our facility, we want to encourage them to always call our 24-hour community hotline, which is 615-5342. So hope that provides an overview of the technology and the regulation and the new monitoring tool that will be put in place. We are looking to this as a tool to help us inform our processes too. And again, have been collaborating with the district and want to be very transparent moving forward with the city and the residents. So.
Thanks, Mr. Wilson. Couple quick questions. When did you say the website would be live?
January 1. So
January
the
1.
go-live date is January 1, 2020, so right around the corner. And,
Great.
we will be fully functional.
And then the community monitoring stations, you mentioned there will likely be one in El Segundo and Manhattan Beach. Do we have any sense of when that will happen and where?
So the district, we talked with city staff today. The district's been on ongoing dialogue with the air district. Many months ago, we forewarned the district that locating available property in both the city of El Segundo and Manhattan Beach might be a challenge, but I know city staff's been active in finding a suitable location. I believe the short-term solution is the district too has some mobile monitoring technologies that they'll be employing.
Now, is that isolating those constituents to the refinery only, or is it able to pick up other constituents as well?
So let me just jump in on one thing about the community piece of the monitoring, and this is kind of a brave new world in this sense of it. We don't know what all is going to find its way to a monitor offside of the property. We know what will cross our property, if you will, and even then there may be influences coming from other facilities surrounding the refinery. That's part of the learning phase of this whole process, and we're going to see some other influences. The airport, other industrial sites surrounding the refinery, power plants, so on and so forth. There's going to be some interesting data coming out of this. So I think that's going to be part of the learning phase, and it's pretty clear that the off-plot areas that are going to be where these monitoring, the community monitoring will be situated, is going to see some influences, as simple as Sepulveda Boulevard, and the volume of traffic you see during a 24-hour cycle. So we're going to pick up all of that, and all of this is going to be a little bit of a learning exercise, frankly.
If you had to guess, when is that a 2020 initiative, do you think, to actually get one of those implemented, installed?
Their job was to get one put together in 2020. I think, as Jeff says, near term, there's some expectation that they may cover their obligations under the law by having a mobile monitoring system until they can get a fixed system in place.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Mr. Spackman or Mr. Wilson? All right, thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Thank you, Lily. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, that's it for presentations. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Nickel,
Here.
Councilmember Pimentel,
Here.
Councilmember Brand,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Perstuck,
Here.
and Mayor Boyles.
Here. Now is the time and place for public communications. Please limit it to 5 minutes per person.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I just want to ask a few questions and get some clarification on the Airbnb proposal or a study that's coming out. My partner and I, we build townhomes in El Segundo. We go in and buy old single-family homes, tear them down, and put up 2,000 square foot, $1.2 to $1.5 million townhomes. And my question is, why are these? It looked like when I read the first draft of the Airbnb proposal was the R3 townhomes. Their townhomes listed under the Condominium Act were excluded. And I was wondering why these homeowners didn't have the same rights as a regular single-family homeowner. We're putting a product out that's of similar price, similar size, similar quality, and it seems to be the thing that the millennials prefer to buy, are townhomes rather than homes with yards, and they rely upon the park systems here. And my question is, why are we not treating them the same?
Thanks, Mr. Mall. You probably know we analyzed the issue, we talked about it, but we're actually continuing. It's on the agenda for tonight, but it's going to be continued into January at this point. Okay. So I'll turn it over to Scott Mitnick if you want to comment on Mr. Mall's question.
We would be happy to, our staff would be happy to sit down with you, and we're going to come back as we were directed with some options for the city council. So that could be one of them for the council to consider.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Mayor Drew Boyles, Mayor Pro Tem Carol Pritztek, Councilmember Don Brand, Councilmember Scott Nickel, and Councilmember Chris Pimentel. Thank you for allowing us to meet with you today. As you may know, on Tuesday, October 8th, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Bill AB 1482 to protect tenants by capping rent increases at 5% each year, plus inflation, and banning landlords from evicting tenants without just cause. This new law would protect tenants that have been in their place of residence for over 1 year. The only loophole in this bill is that even though it was signed in October, it doesn't take place, it's not active until January 1st. In response, eviction attorney Dennis Block, who has been quoted as boasting that he has, quote, evicted more tenants than any other human being on planet Earth, publicly urged landlords to evict their tenants before January 1st and before the new bill would be active. In this way, they would be able to profit financially off of this loophole. Unfortunately, many landlords and owners did follow his advice. Residents all around California were suddenly served with 60-day and 30-day notices. These people are being evicted for no fault of their own, but rather as a move to make a profit. Francisco Duenas, who I talked to last week, is the Housing Justice Campaign Director for the Alliance of California's Community Empowerment. He said that this huge uptick of no-fault evictions has caused many people to become highly concerned. His organization has 80 or more tenants show up all the time, every single meeting they have, because of this widespread issue. And this problem exists here in El Segundo. Our building was sold in October 2019, and we were immediately given 60-day notices on our doors. 8 days after the notices were put on our doors to vacate, our building was put up for sale again.
This was from somebody, an outsider from Hawthorne, who came in, bought the building, put up the eviction notices, and then put up the building again for sale on at least 4 to 5 different real estate websites. In the property history, it shows that the building was sold in October and then put up for sale again November 8th. The new owner bought the building, evicted us, and then put it up for resale. If this is not an example of someone coming in to kick people out and make a profit off of them, I am not sure what is. Other examples here in El Segundo include another building in North El Segundo, same thing, where somebody came in and bought the building. The building has elderly and disabled tenants. The entire building was issued 60-day notices on their doors, and now people that have been residents of El Segundo for 25 years or more are being kicked out. Another mother has had her rent hiked up on her in order to drive her out before January 1st. And another lady I spoke to left already because she was so outraged and just wanted to get away from this treatment. She left even though she was born and raised in El Segundo. Her parents still live here, and even though this is where her daughter just wanted to finish high school. There are other tenants out there in El Segundo that are afraid. In El Segundo, people are hiding in their apartments because they can't afford to move out. In El Segundo, people are afraid that they're going to fight in court and possibly hurt their credit, making it impossible for them to ever rent or own. In El Segundo, people are silently weighing the outcome of this city council meeting. So what can be done to help these tenants? In the past 6 weeks alone, over 36 cities have come to the rescue of their tenants, of their residents, by passing an emergency ordinance that would put the January protections in place now. An emergency ordinance would protect renters who received a 30-day or 60-day notice to vacate units and in progress unlawful detainer cases where the tenant still occupies the unit. These cities saw what was being done and they stood up to make sure it wouldn't happen on their watch. These cities include the city of Los Angeles, where it passed with a vote of 14-0. Councilman David Rio said, quote, "Choosing to evict tenants because you know a renter protection law is coming is nothing short of shameful. Enough is enough." Other cities include Gardena, Hermosa Beach, Long Beach, Malibu, Redondo Beach, and Torrance, just to name a few. Again, there has been over 36 already in just 6 weeks, and there will be more. These cities and their city councils are heroes to their residents. When you look at the pictures of them online and in the paper, they are all smiling together because it is obvious the city council is saving their residents. When I heard about all the ordinances that were being put in place, I got excited. But then I was disheartened when I found out El Segundo had not put anything in place to protect their residents.
Time is up.
You can continue. How much more time do you need?
1 more minute?
Okay.
Thank you. I was disheartened when I heard that El Segundo didn't put anything in place to protect their tenants from what is happening. When I brought this up to my husband, he said El Segundo takes care of their residents. If they didn't put something in place, it's because they did not know. And he was right. I looked at the city council meetings. It hasn't been brought up, which I'm very surprised. So we're bringing it up today. We're sharing this information with you. So please consider this as our bat signal in the sky. We need your help. My neighbor spoke with City Manager Scott Mitnick this past Saturday, and I left him a voicemail as well. And I went by his office to leave off hard copies of all the other cities that have provided this protection, templates of moratoriums, helpful articles, and other information that would be needed so he could discuss it with city council members, because at this point we have our backs up against the walls, and I don't know if we can wait another 2 weeks for something to get passed. The state of California has moved in this direction, as well as 38 other cities. We are turning to you to protect our residents. Is this an emergency? As Councilman Jess Telemontes said, if it's affecting you, it's an emergency. That's what it comes down to. We have shared all the information with you so that you know, and we are asking you to pass this emergency ordinance and go on the record as a city that protects its residents. Thank you.
Wendy, can you state your name, please?
My name is Stephanie Sosa.
Oh, I thought you were Wendy. Okay.
No.
Is Wendy here? Hi, Wendy. No, you can speak as well, but thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Sorry, I assumed that, yeah. Yeah, anyone can approach Mike. Yeah, please, thanks.
Okay. Hi, my name is Wendy Appel. I'm a mail carrier in the city. I've been here for 6 years. I'm a disabled veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I really enjoy delivering mail in this city. I really enjoy being a part of the community. I have a very close relationship with many of the people who live on my route. and I'm being affected by this eviction. And my neighbor has done most of the work on the legal stuff, but I'm just here standing in front of you as a community member who also works very hard to make sure that the Postal Service, at least the people that I service, get amazing delivery service, because I know the post office in El Segundo, it's not what it is where I came from in San Diego, and I'm trying to make efforts there as well. And I feel like this community is important to me, and I'm going to do everything I can to help the community members that I service and that I work for. And I want to stay a part of this community. And I'm just asking you to help us.
Thank you, Ms. Appel.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Oh, yeah.
Hi. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. My name's Tamara Kachowski. I wasn't supposed to speak here tonight. I came in support because I'm one of those tenants who's falling. This is falling on my daughter and I as well. I moved to El Segundo over 16 years ago because this is where I knew I wanted to raise and educate my child, which is what I've done. 16 and a half years later, she's a junior in high school. This is where she wants to be. It's where she wants to graduate. Over the last 2 years, I've been battling breast cancer. So my landlord has taken it upon themselves to use the new law that's coming out to jack up my rent. So when she spoke of somebody with a rent increase, 15.66% increase with less than 60 days notice. I've lived in a building that I've paid close to $400,000 in rent to these people who own 7 properties, 20 in our building alone, taking in excess of $538,000 a year in rent. But they're trying to evict because they want to jack up the rents prior to the date. And if they raise your rent and you pay it, it has to go retro January 1st. But tenants don't get that money back. So those landlords are getting to pocket all the extra money that they're doing above that 8% increase. That's double for me. It's going to put my daughter and I into the streets if I'm not able to stop this. So I'm asking you, put this in place, put your money where your mouth is. I know you guys rise to the occasion no matter what the challenge is, whether it's Topgolf or anything else that's happening in El Segundo. But when I listened to the prayer earlier, you couldn't have spoken more volumes to me than that prayer. Take care of us. We want to be here. My kid wants to graduate from here. We support everything here. I'm one of the old cheer coaches for Pop Warner, for PCC, was hoping to go back this year for Pop Warner, and when I finish this battle, I'm going to. But I need to be able to stay here in my home. I need to be one of those people that doesn't have this on my credit because of what they're doing. It's not okay. And you have to know that some of the landlords that are here in El Segundo, not all of them are great. They really aren't. I happen to live in a building that was built in 1985. There are 20 units in my building. Only 2 units in all of these years have ever been upgraded, and they were upgraded by the tenants who lived there. They paid for their hardwood floorings. They paid for fixtures. They paid for everything, just like my building, my apartment. I have peeling paint. I have a garbage disposal that doesn't work. They turn off the filter in the pool unless their grandchildren are in it. Nothing works. I call city. City has come out and had to cite them. Codes, many violations. But they use the tenants in our building. They use our fear and they prey upon our fear to keep us quiet and to silence us to all the things that they're doing wrong. So when this started, I decided I can't be part of that anymore. I won't be complacent anymore and allow them to push us out. There's a lot of people in my building that have immigration status and they're using that. 5 people to an apartment, 1 family across from us, their rent is so high that they want to be here. 5 people in there, they have absolutely no furniture and 2 mattresses on the floor since July. You can't ask somebody to raise the rent and that you're entitled to and that, oh, because of the new law, we're bringing it up to market now.
How can you bring up a unit to market, the price to market, when you haven't made any changes or improvements since 1985? So I'm asking you to help us. I'm asking you to put in place what the other cities have done, and I echo Stephanie's thoughts and everybody else, because it's not just me. 4 people in my building, in a building of 20, are already gone. 4. And there's more on the way. It's just this constant. And there's only a few of us that have been there for years. So please don't put my daughter and I and her therapy dog out into the streets, please. We need to stay where we are. I need a year and a half. So thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tamara.
Hi, my name's Adolfo Mueller. I've lived here in El Segundo for 25 years. When I first moved in, I love this city. My son was born here in El Segundo. He went to El Segundo High School. The building that I live in, not the best looking building, but it's a 2-bedroom, and we love it. We love it very much. Just 2 months ago, we got the notice that the building was sold, and suddenly we got the 60-day notice just a month later. Everybody's pretty much moved out. Only a few of us have stragglers are left behind. So the 30th of last month was my last date. Kind of scared because I don't know what we're going to do. I'm having to pay all the bills to have to move out. I'm getting no compensation for it. Not that I'm expecting it, but it is pretty scary knowing that I'm having to move into my family's bedroom. My son and I are going to have to take a spare bedroom with a family member in another city. So it's pretty scary to know that I could be out in the street if I don't comply and they ruin my credit and they take me to court. I may not be able to rent anymore. I definitely can't rent in El Segundo the way the rates are going. But if I try to get in another city, I probably, like I said, if they ruin my credit. So I hope you guys help out. It's really stressed us out. And as she mentioned, some of the people in my building are elderly and disabled, and they're literally being put out in the street. They have fixed income. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Adolfo. Okay, is anyone else up for public communications? Okay, seeing none. That closes public communication. I'm going to turn it over to council comments. And actually, Scott, I know this is, we've been talking about this via email and everything else the last few days. Do you have any updates for us or any insight on this matter?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, what you heard from the 4 speakers is just a sample of the impact on the rental community here in El Segundo. And I've had at least 2 long conversations with Mrs. Apple, right, or Wendy Sosa. Thank you for the information. It was very, very helpful. The city attorney and I spent literally every day during the Thanksgiving holiday long week trying to make sense of this. So let's be clear, if the stress that these folks are facing is not due to any of the actions of anybody in this room, whether it's the city council as a governing board, or your staff, or the residents, or even the, well, I don't want to go there. But this was the state legislature that tried to come up with a one-size-fits-all solution to a very complex and complicated problem. And what we're witnessing here is the law of unintended consequences. We can't really rationalize or justify what's happened, but we can help explain. And I provided some information with the city council and in the expensive coastal communities that are being hit somewhat hard with this issue. We we can make our residents aware. Technically, the State Department of Consumer Affairs has a hotline and all of this, but it doesn't necessarily change their reality. There are cities that have done urgency ordinances to basically move up the effective date rather than being January 1st. You can move it up so it's effective. We could even do it retroactively a month or two. That still doesn't solve the dilemma or the situation. It may result in some additional compensation to those individuals who are being evicted. This law creates some really perverse incentives for property owners to evict people, and punishes those landlords and those tenants for living in a situation with below market rents. This new law gives an incentive to evict people and bring the rents up in January. So, council, the only options you really have, the only real option you have at this time is an urgency ordinance to try to bring the no-fault eviction rules into play. Will that help? I can let the city attorney can address that. And ideally, these landlords would provide those benefits to those that they're evicting. That would be our professional opinion. We don't have much by way of ability to force that. I think, if you don't mind, I'll turn it over to the city attorney. He can provide legal clarity, and then staff's available for additional questions. So go ahead.
Well, and at this point, anything the council would do, or if it wanted to do something as far as an urgency ordinance, it would only impact activities that occur after that urgency ordinance. So, for example, if you would have adopted one tonight, it would protect tenants for the next 28 days until the state law takes effect. Retroactively, there's nothing you can do to assist the people that you heard from this evening. They were served notices under the law that existed at that time, and so anything the council might do would only be prospective and would not help out the people that are here talking this evening. Would it help out somebody? I don't know. It might. These rent control ordinances, which is what the state has effectively put in place, and it has two major components. One's the rent cap, and the other is controlling evictions. And those are very common in rent control ordinances. With that said, rent control ordinances are very complex. There are over a dozen different exceptions to what is considered with or without cause, so which would restrict or further restrict a landlord's ability to evict tenants, and there's lots of exceptions, and so it gets into some very complex policy issues. Cities generally spend a year or two to come up with a rent control ordinance because of all those complex considerations. And so while the council could do something on an urgency basis, and cities have, it is a very complex issue to tackle in a quick manner. I'm not recommending for it or against it. I'm just explaining my observation of how complex these ordinances are and the limited time period at this point that you could affect people.
Thank you. Anyone on the council have some comments?
So there's no recourse to put anything in place to do retro to since these eviction notices have been placed? Sure, there's nothing we can do to. You can't undo it?
I do not believe a court would recognize as a defense to an eviction process a law that was put into place after the eviction process had commenced. As a general rule, courts do not recognize laws until they take effect. And now the state has had, other than government, where the state has retroactively put laws in place to affect local government, there are some exceptions for that. When we're talking about private interests, though, and contracts, no, the courts would be very unlikely to recognize anything we would do to protect people that have already been served under a set of different rules.
I know Councilman Pimentel has some thoughts you want to share.
I think it would be an understatement to say that many of us were furious as this came to our attention on all counts, because this law, while obviously well-intentioned, is so fabulously poorly conceived in implementation that in a city where we have so many of our renters who pay below market rent, that they would become victims of a perverse incentive where a landowner, a property owner is told your only option to ever monetize or achieve the value of your property is to punish the people whom you rent from, who rent from you. In that circumstance, that incredible, bizarre Sophie's choice that is put out there is just maddening. And because the people victimized are the people we see right here, right? People on fixed incomes, seniors, people disabled. We as a city spend so much time on the Park Vistas of the world and ADA compliance and thinking through housing, protecting overlays, and to have a ham-fisted law come in and undo so much of that. I don't think it's an understatement to say that it is a purge of people from this community who are on fixed incomes. I am incredibly frustrated by the fact that we are somehow lorded over to the city, that we are either to rob from a property owner, who some may own 100 units, some it might be that guy's life investment to own one building, right? And that might be his retirement plan. So we either rob from that, or we sit idly by, if even if we help one person, while people are put out over Christmas. And I mean, we are obviously not the body of terminal control on this. This lays directly at the feet of our state senator and our state assemblywoman, who, God knows, never asked us what this would look like on the ground when they put it in. Instead, they decided we're going to call it a Tenant Protection Act because we assume every tenant in California is paying market rate. And we have property owners who, for whatever motivation, be it a predatory scenario or out of the goodness of their heart are renting below market, are then told it is now or never. You will never bring this to market rate unless you put people on the street. And that is an absurd construct, an absurdly arbitrary market externality that was engineered naively like any bad construction from Sacramento. And it is just maddening. Now, here we are where legally there's not, it seems like we have a finite number of things, or we create a bad law or a bad urgency ordinance that we litigate forever, and people end up staying through January instead of getting out in December, and at the same time alienate or arbitrarily constrain the value of property to people who've invested in these things. It is an awful scenario to be in as a city. It's certainly an awful scenario to be in. The worst victims are the people who are most at risk. And I think I would understate it if I said I didn't throw one or two things in the process of ruining all of your Thanksgivings, and I apologize for that, but I was furious. It is heartbreaking, and it is just, if anybody wants a ride to Ben Allen and Autumn Burke's, I will drive them there, and we can all talk to them about, why are you doing this? You have the state law construct. Did you not think this through? If we can take 11 months to decide how to parse out a golf course, I don't think it would have required 11 hours to talk to an actual landlord and say, what would you do if we put this law into effect? It is absolutely absurd. So I don't know if I really have anything to go with this, because we obviously, our hands are somewhat tied in an ex post facto legal scenario. We can't undo state law and contravene it. I don't think we're in the business of robbing from our property owners, but the entire thing is maddening. And it is extremely frustrating, and I think that we have a state delegation that certainly is not thinking through the full implementation of their actions.
Thank you, Chris. Councilman Nickel, did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to ask a question, but I think you answered it. But then listening to Councilmember Pimentel's description of everything and the world that we live in and the positions that we find ourselves in, it dawned on me, could we not, as a body, agree to have a letter sent on the behalf of the city of El Segundo, signed by the city council, to our representatives, asking them to yield their power, asking them to do something about this?
Absolutely.
I mean, seen as, to your point, Chris, and I don't disagree with you, I would love to say, okay, hey, let's do a special meeting on Friday or next Monday, and let's get an urgency order in and there's going to be typos. There's going to be something wrong with it. And, all of you sitting here in the audience, you're going to feel like you have a great victory. And you're putting, what do they say, a Band-Aid on a wound that needs a tourniquet. And so we don't believe that an urgency ordinance would solve the situation you're in. but powers above us could do something, or we could plead with them to do something. I mean, rather than sit back and say, oh, well, I guess we can't really do anything, it's not going to help anybody, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's try to do something. I don't know.
Here's a question. Do legislatures, do they have a special session? If we ask them, there's all kinds of carve-outs for any kind of law. If we ask for some sort of grandfathering status, an amendment, some sort of codicil put on, 90245 gets this treatment for this because we have
We can't be the only
landowners?
city experiencing this. Clearly, there's emergency ordinances all over that I'm sure landlords are fighting.
Yeah, but I don't care about those cities. Like, we don't ask for anything from these guys. All they want to do is tell us to not use plastic forks. Like, can we ask them for this?
You certainly can, and I don't believe they're in session at the moment. They can be called into session by the governor. They can go into session, but I think they're probably off through the end of the year, but.
I could help shed some light, and again, it's not necessarily an answer we want to hear, but these very questions that you have, the very emotions you've had, those have been conveyed to different experts and lobbyists out there so we could try to gain an understanding. So here's sort of the common response. The state legislature, this doesn't mean your staff is agreeing with this, all right? I'm just going to convey what was conveyed to us. The state legislature did what it did in the context of looking at the broader, bigger picture and seeing rents rise throughout the state. So they tried to come up with a one-size-fits-all solution to help mitigate the overall impact, recognizing there are going to be some unintended negative consequences, which we heard tonight from just 4. But it's not just 4, it's a lot more in this community, and we know that. They didn't think it all the way through, or if they did, they're looking at the greater picture. So the argument would be, hey, in El Segundo, the vast majority of your residents do pay market rate. And so they will be protected with respect to rate increases going forward. They are discounting the hundreds or maybe 1,000, 2,000 people that are negatively impacted. They look at it, we don't agree with this because we're in the trenches, we have to implement it. You're hearing about it politically, we hear about it day to day. In the conversations with these individuals, they're really disheartening, and there's nothing more distressing and frustrating for those of us in local government to feel like we can't do anything. But you could attempt to do the retroactivity. I do want to point that out. We heard from the speakers, you read the newspaper articles, there are some cities that have done the urgency ordinance with retroactivity to 2 months for 60 days. You could do that. What your city attorney is saying, it's questionable if that would hold up in court. But
that could actually make a situation worse for these tenants, because if they go in there with something, a law that isn't going to be recognized by the court, and they hold out and they fight against that and they get evicted, they now have a judgment on their financial records along with not having potentially paid rent. So I know there are some cities that have put some retroactive provisions in those, and I don't think that's going to hold up in court.
Is there anything else? You guys have had a few days to
Yeah.
contemplate this. What other solutions do we have?
So, the council, you need to be commended because you've asked these thoughtful questions over the last several days, and we've been trying to figure out what we can do. Unfortunately, we are strapped. Urgency ordinance is clearly an option. Another, what we are attempting to do is to do at the staff level to help these individuals who have not left yet and who've got these eviction notices to see if something can be done. I've encouraged one individual to work with the landlord to see if they can do something and voluntarily comply with the provisions of AB 1482 with respect to the 1 month's rent payment and to help with relocation. We can certainly do that. We have no authority to do that, but we can certainly try to help them understand what the provisions of the law are, to the State Department of Consumer Affairs and other folks. But I don't have a problem if you want to. It's not on the agenda, but if I don't see any resistance at the staff level, we could, well, these 4 individuals who are here, we know where 2 of them live. We could ask the other 2 if they would share with us where they live and try to see if we could help broker some sort of understanding with their landlords to help them as they have to transition. That's the best I could deliver to you as your city manager. and some would say that's going a little too far, but these are residents, and that's the best that we can come up with right now. You can do the urgency ordinance. Your city attorney is advising it may not have the impact you think it would.
Can you expound on that a little bit more, Mark? Just the downside of doing the urgency ordinance from a tenant standpoint?
Well, it would, for people that might be evicted after the ordinance is in place, it would provide them with protection, and so it would provide them with some protection. My point was the people that have already been evicted or are in the process, I don't believe that an urgency ordinance would do anything for them. So there may be tenants that may benefit from an urgency ordinance at this point in time. And on the other side of that are, as Councilmember Pimentel pointed out, there may be property owners that it will be a detriment to them, depending on what their situation is. Because like I said, these are really complex, and I've spent a fair amount of time over the years dealing with some different rent control ordinances. They're usually, again, if a city's going to do them, and most of the large cities already have rent control ordinances, the LAs, the Santa Monica, the Long Beaches, actually West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, there are cities that have done it, but they spend a lot of time developing them, and there's a lot of people that argue there are a lot of flaws in those. But from a policy perspective, to do one on an urgency basis, probably not preferable because it is so complex, and there's things you might want to understand and different applications of it that, again, there would be unintended consequences if the council did this.
Well, I think it's worth saying, if we heard about substandard accommodations now, I think there's another element to this where we would be locking people into substandard accommodations, because something that is a rent-controlled, fixed, coercive environment is never going to get upgraded. Let me ask this. In a urgency ordinance, is there an ability for an urgency ordinance of a slightly different stripe where, and this is spitballing, this is not advocacy, but if we were to ask landlords who are evicting people solely because they are seeking to not be penalized by this law, if we ask them if they're doing it under that guise, that they had to provide some sort of rent credit or something going forward for, a month's rent or whatever some of the things are that are in the new state law as it goes into effect, because 1482 does provide that, right? If you are evicted post January 1st, you are provided with a month's rent. Is that correct?
It depends on the situation, but if it's done, there's going to be 3 options after January 1 for evictions in California. Now, a lot of cities have much more restrictive laws than what the state's going to put on the books, and those will take place or take precedent over the state. But for those cities that are going to be governed by the state, you can either be evicted with cause, which means you have failed to pay rent, you're causing destruction to the premises, you're a nuisance to your neighbors. Then there's going to be what they're going to call no-fault evictions, which means property owner wants to move into one of the units on the site. Property owners, landlord's going to make certain improvements to the property that necessitates people be out of the building for a certain amount of time, and there's definitions look a little ambiguous to me as far as what I think the term was significant renovations or something to that effect. But there are a number of things that will be considered no fault, and for those, the tenant will get 1 month's rent if it's that category. And then there are going to be some tenants that if a landlord doesn't have for cause reason or a no fault reason, then people cannot be evicted at all. So those will be the 3, if you will, categories that people will fall into. And those no fault reasons are things that cities really struggle with policy-wise to put in place.
So it sounds like, given the ambiguity in the language, as you suggest, it would be very easy for a property owner to justify evicting with no fault to do a bathroom remodel or something. It doesn't even have to be that capital intensive. Is that accurate?
I think the wording is substantial, right?
Yeah, I thought the state law was a little lacking as far as what that meant. When you look at cities that have rent control ordinances, they get pretty detailed about what someone has to do to the units and before you could evict someone. And
But the state law lacks that?
yeah, I thought as I reviewed it, it was a little lacking in definition on that, but.
They do talk about substantial renovation.
So the
Right.
urgency ordinances that the 3 cities passed, does that protect people from being evicted with no fault past January 1st?
Probably
Well, they're just bringing it up to January 1st because at that point the state law will protect them. So the cities are trying to put in place.
But I guess what I'm suggesting is even then, after January 1st, it's a little bit tenuous for a tenant. I mean, you've got a situation where it's not that difficult for a landlord to justify improvements to the property to evict people and pay a month's premium.
That's quite possible, given the way I read the state law. That yes, it would be not as complex as it would be, or difficult, or as expensive as it would be in cities that have real intense rent control ordinances.
And then if you do that, if you choose that option as a landlord, then you have an opportunity to raise to market. Is that how I understand it?
Yes. Now there are some restrictions on that, but generally yes.
So I guess are we delaying the inevitable, given how poorly the state law was constructed?
Given, if you watch how housing laws in this state have evolved over the last 3 or 4 years, it may very well be that Sacramento will follow this up with perhaps legislation that is more closely mirrors like the city of LA or Santa Monica rent control laws, which make it very difficult to get out tenants. There are reasons that you have to pay them about 3 or 4 times the amount the state requires, and the limited reasons you can get people out there's much fewer reasons, and they're much more difficult to be able to achieve those.
And if I can interject, some cities have rent control, decontrol. I've had some experience with that, and so that is much more flexible because you have rent control in place, and a landlord can have really low rents and not be punished in terms of the value of his property. And then when that tenant vacates, they can go up to market. This situation doesn't work that way. It doesn't allow for that. It's telling the property owners, the council knows this, I'm saying this for the public's consumption, this law creates an incentive to bring the rents up as high as you can quickly, because that'll be your base. Otherwise, it's March of 2019.
It says it's now or never.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. But for the people in this room that are concerned and those that are watching, I don't have a problem as your city manager to try to be helpful to them and have work with staff to work with their landlords, because the clock is ticking. We have less than a month here. Some of these landlords, they don't have that many units. They might be willing to, I can't speak for them, but I'd like to believe they'd be willing to work with these tenants and help them with their transition. That might be naive, but I think some of them would perhaps be willing to do that.
Is there an organization has the League of Cities taken a position on this new law? Or anyone else, any other government organization?
There are clearly groups that opposed it. But those who were trying on the renter side were advocating for this bill.
Right.
That's the irony here.
Right.
The league, I can't remember, was the league neutral on it? I have to go back.
We talked about writing a letter as one government body to our legislators. Is there a group that is already involved in this process that we could rally with to help?
Well, it's a little too late for that. I know there are other cities. One lobbyist I was talking to said other cities are trying to wrestle with this, and it's not having the effect that they were hoping it would. I think the best bet now to convey the frustration we can certainly do a letter. I can bring that back at the next council meeting, but I think personal phone calls from each of you to our state senator and assembly member, or an in-person visit. I believe is the assembly member going to be here for the
holiday parade?
Yeah, that's probably not acceptable, but there are ways to do it. But for the individuals in this room, I don't want to make light of any of this.
I don't object.
Yeah,
I'll ride right in a car.
Okay. But to hear this item's not on the agenda, so we have to be careful how much of the discussion. But this is such a real difficult issue. I have no problem to help these folks in their relationship with the landlords as they have to transition out to get the best deal for them.
Could we do an urgency ordinance that says if it's not an eviction for cause that requires them to pay a
Well,
month's rent?
The way those type of urgency ordinances, Torrance is a good example. They said it's retroactive 2 months because that's a 60-day period. So if you wanted to do it this week, we bring it back, you go back 2 months, and then the no-fault eviction parameters would apply and conditions, which would mean the 1 month rent that would be forgiven or paid.
Well, I mean, if we were sensitive to the concerns of a property owner having the value of their property arbitrarily depressed, and so we discounted that part of the urgency ordinance.
Correct.
But said, look, if you are, because of this law, going to move people out of these units, there's a piece of the new law that we want, and that's the continuity payment for 1 month's rent. Is that something that we could do by an urgency ordinance?
That's
Yes,
what other
that's-
cities have done,
That's
yes.
what the focus has been, is rather than, because it raises a number of legal concerns for the city to all of a sudden put in its own cap on rent increases. But the cities that I've reviewed, they've focused on that eviction without cause issue and providing a level of protection for those people in that group.
Because I have to imagine, we have 4 people here who are young, mobile, and happy, who can get around. There's a lot of people in this community who are probably affected by this who are not particularly mobile and can't come out here on a rainy, chilly night in December. And those are the people that we would do well to bear in mind as we think of like what is the true ecosystem in which we're discussing.
But that's correct. But this item's not on the agenda. So if you had it on the agenda, you'd probably have more people here. I just point that out. So these are individuals that took it on their own accord to come here. So it's really council's prerogative. Have to be sensitive because it's not on the agenda.
Well,
but if there's interest in doing
we
some sort of urgency
Can't
ordinance, we can do
introduce it
that.
at the end.
We would need to call a special meeting and have something ready for you to review, and we can, I mean, if the council wants to call an agenda for that purpose, we can do that.
What's the notice period on a special? I can't recall.
24 hours?
Yeah.
And remember, if it's an urgency ordinance, it would require 4 votes. So 4 affirmative votes. So if only 4 show up, all 4 would have to vote yes.
So it has to be an agenda item. We can't introduce it in comments?
But we can bring it, today's Tuesday, we can come back on Thursday or Friday.
Sometimes you can add an item to an agenda if you came to your attention after the posting of the agenda and it's something that needs the council to take action on it before the conclusion of the meeting you're in. The problem that I see with that here is this bill's been around for quite some time. It was passed
October.
back in October, so I don't think we can really justify adding it to the agenda tonight, but we could have a special meeting and on 24 hours notice and have the council consider different options, and we could be prepared with different versions of different ordinances.
Could we get, as part of that consideration, that 24-hour period, do you think it's likely we could hear from a couple property owners too?
Absolutely.
Okay. What do y'all think about that special meeting?
I mean, as a general ethos of it, I'm not interested in holding property owners hostage to arbitrarily depressed values. I would be really open to ideas as to how to make this bitter pill even mildly more palatable to I mean, what is clearly our most at-risk and sensitive part of our population. I would desperately love to hear some property owners, big and small, describe, because I don't even really have a sense of how big a sum we would be talking about. You know, and if there's, you know, there will be, doubtless there are compelling stories here, there will be compelling stories on the other side. And no one wants to turn a council meeting into a battle of sob stories, because there will be hard stories on either side of this. I would be certainly open to some creativity if there's another city that's done something right, or if the staff has an idea. But, you know, I don't want to drag this thing around if there's not appetite for it either. Because this could be a scenario where there's just no right answer. So I would be open to a special meeting for it, with the caveat that I don't want anyone to think I'm going to try and ram through bad policy if it looks like bad policy.
Thanks, Chris. Carol, Mayor Pro Tem?
I agree with Chris.
Okay, Scott?
I'm going to be here on Thursday night for the tree lighting.
Cowboys Bears.
Oh, that's right.
Don?
Yeah, I'd come to a special meeting if we were able to set one up. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to do any good. It's like we're chasing smoke here and trying to do something when it probably won't make any difference realistically. It's just a desperation for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's what you get from Sacramento, is you get one-size-fits-all bills, you get local control completely disrespected, ADUs jammed down. This is just going to keep continuing, especially around housing issues.
Thanks, Don. All right, there you have it. Special meeting it is.
Let me offer this. We hear clearly the concerns. Let us work the logistics and figure out the best day and time to do that. I would like to ask that the individuals who spoke, Barbara Voss, our deputy city manager, if you could make sure she has your name and your address. You don't have to provide that, but it will help us, because we have the addresses for two, but the other two I'd like to have. So we'll come back. We'll give you the option to come back.
It would be really helpful to know too, to the extent that like how big this is within our population.
Yeah.
Even if it's guesstimates.
Right. Well, we hear you on that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will follow up accordingly,
Okay.
and we'll follow up with 4 of you. Okay.
All right. We're moving on to item A.
I'm sorry. Can I clarify? We will put it on the city website, and we'll reach out to make sure that the date and time are known to both the landlord community and the renter community as best we can identify them.
Thank you. All right, and thank you for your comments this evening. Okay, item A, approval of agenda order and waiver of full reading of ordinances and resolutions. First, we're going to, are there any changes to the agenda? None? Okay. Okay. Anyone like to remove items from the agenda, from the consent calendar, sorry?
Item number 3.
Item 3. Any others?
Nope.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve items 1, 2, and 4?
Yeah, I think you have to go back and do a,
We already, okay. We said there were no changes to the
I would like
agenda,
to make
so we
a
don't have to
motion.
make a motion.
I'd like to
on
make
that.
a motion to approve the order of the agenda
Thank
with
you.
the item
I'll
pulled.
second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Scott, remember next meeting, we're going back to the old agenda. We said
I
that
was
last
supposed
meeting.
to talk to you at lunch, but
Okay.
My fault.
All right. Do I have a motion to?
So moved.
Yes, to pull item 3. Okay. Do I have a second on that?
second?
All in favor? Aye. Do I have a motion to not rearrange the order of the agenda?
So
So
we've got
Do I have a
past
second?
that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. All kidding aside,
We approved one.
now we got to approve items
just to
1,
be-
2. Yes.
Just,
Do I have a motion to
It's okay.
approve the agenda order and waiver of full reading of ordinances and
moved.
resolution? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
and
This
just
isn't
want to be
working
clear, I'm sorry, I'm really not.
How is it?
Did-
How are we
did-
going to be clear at this
did-
point?
Did,
Clear as mud.
did the remainder of the consent calendar get approved?
No.
No.
Item
Okay.
3 has been pulled. No, actually,
Yeah,
item
the
3 has been
remainder, 1,
pulled.
2, and 4.
So one.
So now may I have a motion to approve items 1, 2, and 4?
So
So
moved.
Do
moved.
I have a
Second.
Second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
This isn't working out really
No,
well
we're going
for
to
us.
change. We're going to go
Well,
back to
I'm
the
gonna
way it
check
was.
back on you in about 6 months. see if
Yeah.
you got
No,
it.
we're going back to the way we had it. We appreciate the creativity, but we're going to go back to the old way. Item 3, Carol, floor is yours.
Approve the proposed city council meeting calendar for the 2020, for the year 2020, which includes recommending a summer recess from July 17th through August 4th. So I was just going over the calendar that if we do pass this, that means we would, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. There would be 5 weeks that we would have canceled a meeting. I'm not sure if I agree with the length of the summer session. I just really wanted to have some dialogue around it because I know historically we always close the July 4th, anything around July 4th, but this year it actually falls in the second week, so it's really not as consistent. So it's because it's the 7th, so it's not necessarily something that would need to be canceled. And then, historically, a lot of people go on vacation more in August than in July. So if anything, if we were going to do any type of recess, it would really be better in the August timeframe. So I just wanted to have some dialogue around that.
I don't disagree with that statement of August to July, but we do budget study sessions in August. Typically, August is a heavy work month for us up here. I know me personally, I flew back into town for a council meeting in July last summer. I'm pretty sure my wife was okay with, but if you ask her, she may say differently. So that's why I was okay with this. I think if you give staff a long enough run up to it, then I can only guess that May and June will be very busy meetings, getting everything done that they need done, our direction on items, so that they can work through the summer on things, and then coming back in August, hitting the ground running with budget stuff. I'm not opposed to the proposed calendar.
Thanks, Scott. Any other comments?
I think that it's worth noting if there are things of significance, we can recalendar the meetings. They're not, it's not something that is set in stone, and I don't pretend that. While I think our meetings are incredibly critical to the operation of the city, they may not be as critical as we think sometimes, especially late in the summer. The Texas State Legislature meets every other year. Presumably they don't come up with bad laws like 1482. So maybe 6 weeks off from us may not be the worst thing in the summer. So I think for a year, I think we're okay giving it a try.
Okay, someone like to make a motion?
I'll make
Motion
a
to approve
motion.
item 3.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
5, Don, you gonna abstain or no? Okay. You want to go aye? Yeah. Okay, 5-0. All right, thanks, Don. We appreciate
Better write that one down right there.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a public hearing next. Thank you, Carol, for bringing that up. All right. This is a time and place hereto fixed for a public hearing to establish a $110.60 annual fee for a street vendor permit to be incorporated into the city's master fee schedule. City Clerk, was proper notice of the hearing given in a timely manner?
Yes, it was.
Has any written communication been received regarding this public hearing?
None.
Thank you. Public hearing is now open. Mr. Mitnick, who will present?
Juliana Demers, our Business Services Manager in the Finance Department, will present.
Good evening, Mayor Boyles, member of City Council. So this item is just following up the approval of Ordinance 1593 on October 1st, establishing a process to create a permit process for street vendors. And at that point in time, we didn't have the entire process and the fee to go along with this ordinance. So this item is just to establish the fee in the amount of $110.60 for the yearly permit for the street vendors.
Thank you. Any questions for Juliana?
I just want to have some clarification on the street vendor, because I know with Candy Cane Lane coming up shortly, and last year there was an influx of people selling, I mean, not beyond the kids selling their little cocoa because they're raising money for a nonprofit or something, but there was a lot of people selling product up and down the street. They're pulling out their carts in front of people's houses and selling stuff, and people were getting very angry. This ordinance does not allow for, that ordinance that we passed does not allow for that, correct? They can't, it's on residential streets.
Correct.
Could you just clarify that?
Correct. It does have some type of restrictions for public events. The police departments are the ones that are going to be enforcing, so I'm going to have to defer the enforcement, Candy Cane Lane, in this special events to the police department. But for the fee itself, we will not be charging any permit fee for this year. We are going to be doing an outreach to those vendors that wanted to be there, like advising that if it's starting January 1st, we will be charging for processing of this permit. But for the enforcement, I will have to defer to police.
City Manager, the street vending ordinance does not allow for vending in residential areas, correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Except for
Except for events.
So there is some exceptions on events.
And that's
special
why
events.
I'm worried
Yes.
about, I just want to make clear understanding about Candy Cane Lane, that we're not going to turn it into street vendors going up and down selling stuff down people, because there was a lot of trash left. There was, really encumbered the residents that,
We'll need to review that. It's sort of a hybrid situation, the way that gets set up. We'll
I
need
know
to
we had
review
some
that.
dialogue about it when we
And
first.
I do know that public safety staff, public works staff, finance staff they're very proactive, and they've already had a series of meetings and.
Well, they would
gearing
have
up-
to pull a permit, and we can deny those permits, correct?
So we are not going to enforce the permit for this current event. We are going to do an outreach on this current event, so the police is going to be there. So the officers are going to be there. They're going to be, doing this outreach, monitoring who's coming in, and we're going to be distributing flyers and communication to these vendors in regards to our permit processing.
I think to answer your question specifically, if I understand it, is we need to review whether we could prohibit the vendors from being in that area, because it's sort of a hybrid event it's not technically called a city event, but we close down the streets and we cordon them off, and it takes on almost the appearance of a park. I know that, I'm just going to look at that and confer with the police department.
Well, I know we talked about that, and I brought this up at the time we brought this ordinance in, and we were told we can stop people from vending. So I want to, now we're saying that that's not true?
This law actually this is a state law that reduced the city's ability to regulate street vendors dramatically. And we have to allow them in all of the commercial areas. They can't block sidewalks. They have to be permitted. They have to comply with health code. And they have a right to use our parks. But by and large, it was a reduction in the city's ability to regulate street vendors.
But I do recall, we asked this as a direct question of, will we have people with carts in the middle of Acacia at Candy Cane Lane? And I thought we were told
no.
no.
We did ask that question.
And I'm sorry, I don't recall that, but I will review that with the state law. And again, we've been overridden by the state law as far as our ability to regulate. We regulated to the extent we can. I'll have to look at that particular situation, and I'll confer with the city manager and the police chief, and then we'll advise council.
I do apologize, the police chief's not here, but I do remember the discussion. I know there are proactive measures being taken, so we'll report back to you within 24 hours. I'll give you a memo of what we're doing specifically for Candy Cane Lane.
We just really need to get some clarification on
Yep.
that by the next meeting, because it will become a major problem.
Right. Okay. Well,
Thanks. Okay, the public hearing is now open for public input. Any public comments? Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any further council discussion?
I think it's just important that I think this is one of those items that comes before us. The state, again, passes a law. It comes to us. First time it came through the agenda, I'm sure people paid attention to it, but they weren't sure about it. Now it's here again, and it's an opportunity for us to say, okay, we're aware of this because we're being asked to make policy on it, make choices. But I think it's important that our residents know, like, if you've been to a sporting event, like I know you've been to LAFC, when you leave Bank of California Stadium, there's easily 200.
I thought you were going to ask me how many bacon-wrapped hot dogs I eat on the way out.
Well, that's
at least 3 usually.
There's at least 200 of those little carts, and they keep getting smaller of vendors selling bacon-wrapped hot dog and LA dog. And they definitely do not comply with the health code. There's no 3-compartment hand-washing sink anywhere nearby. Are we saying that they're within the law, and can our residents expect that during our 4th of July celebration that they're going to be buying a bacon-wrapped hot dog on the corner of Pine and Eucalyptus? I just want to make sure we're setting expectations.
No, I understand.
Here.
I go to sporting events too, and I see all those vendors, and I have my doubts that they're in compliance with all the county health codes. But it is the county that regulates that aspect of it, not the city. We can alert the county if we think there are issues, but we don't have the citation authority for health code violations.
So it can happen.
It can.
They can't block the street, they cannot impede traffic, but on days like that, when we have this, streets blocked off,
Right.
someone could essentially be walking through Rec Park with a cart selling hot dogs
Yes.
legally.
Yes.
They do have to get a permit, though.
They have to get a permit.
No, $110. Get a
And
permit.
if you don't have a permit and you're selling in the town, and you get stopped and you cannot provide that permit, can they get a retroactive permit? I mean, talk to me about this. I just want people to understand what the rules are, and so they see it all play out.
I understand, and if you're doing business without a business license, you can be cited for that and get fined. Do people do that? I'm sure they do, but I mean, there is a remedy. But
Let me just interject. If our police officers or code enforcement folks see activity that we know is violating a law, we'll deal with it. If they're impeding the public right-of-way or flow of traffic, we can deal with that. So let us, I could certainly put on the next agenda, but even prior to that, because this event will start prior to that, I believe, right? The 14th? The 16th, and the meeting's on the 17th. We'll get you something in writing by the end of this week to clarify our approach to this and how enforcement will work. But the bottom line, we have to say on the record, if anybody's violating the law and we know that's the case, they will be cited and they will have to be dealt with.
Well,
So-
is there any way that we could do an outreach to the community members that live around Acacia and Walnut, and give them some type of notice so who to contact if they come across this type of vending in front of their house?
Let me see if we can
Yeah,
do
so
that.
maybe
It
we could
sounds
at least,
reasonable.
we could do an
and-
outreach, at least, because I'm
Yep.
a little concerned that, come Candy Cane Lane opening night, and we are going to have a deluge of emails because people are going to be vending.
Okay. We will,
And I understand, and again, this is not as dramatic as the earlier discussion, but it's the same issue of the state saying this is the way things are going to be done, and we have to take that and do the best we can to make it fit within the city.
we hear the concerns of the council and by extension the community, so we will come up with a game plan to address those, including the outreach.
Well, and I know that the Candy Cane Lane event has never been a city event, and so we have never provided any porta potties or trash cans, so maybe we can get around it by
There's been trash cans provided the past 2 years.
2 years, okay.
And I believe EDCO plans to expand that
There is trash cans.
distribution.
Okay.
Yeah, but really getting in the weeds here, but we hear clearly what your concerns are, so let us reassure you that your concerns are noted, we dealt with, and including the community outreach. So we
I
hear-
think one of the reasons, Scott, and this is before your time, just that we're getting in the weeds on this particular issue is that this was a really hot topic a
Right.
few years ago as we made some decisions that weren't popular with all the residents to close off certain streets. Scott happened to live there at the time, had a very vocal, participatory group of residents in that neighborhood. So we haven't really gotten an update, I don't think, this year in terms of
Okay.
Candy Cane Lane that I recall. Have we? Did we get one?
We
Yeah, we
did. We
did.
got a briefing on it, and I spoke to the chief.
Did I have to recuse myself on that one? I'm just
yesterday.
kidding. Okay,
No, we-
I apologize.
He's
So-
actually, he told me that there's going to be outreach to the community this week, a letter from his office.
Sounds
Okay.
like there's still questions, though, so anything you can do to address those would be great. Okay.
We'll absolutely follow
Any other
up.
council discussion on this item related to street vendor permits?
We're not going to make the 4-foot-tall lemonade sellers get a permit, correct?
I will not say we will violate a law or look the other way. No, I hear you loud and clear. We hear you loud and clear. No, we get it.
So moved.
So moved. Okay, thank you.
We hear you.
All right.
have to vote on
City
this.
attorney, no, we don't, but thank you. City attorney will read the resolution by title only.
Yes, council, mayor and council, a resolution of the city of El Segundo establishing a fee for street vendor permit is ready for adoption.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
Where are we gonna get one of those hot dogs, though?
I heard the Purple Orchid. No, I don't
see
know. I
'em.
heard they have them out front there. All right. Thanks for that. I apologize if I drew a blank on the Candy Cane Lane presentation. All right. Moving on here. We are continuing item 6. And what's the date? January 21st? Is that still the date? Okay, thank you. So we're continuing short-term rentals until the January 21st, 2020 City Council meeting. Any context to add there, Scott, in terms of why we're continuing?
Staff needs more time to analyze the different options that we were directed to look at and come back. And we wanted to be sensitive to the holidays so nobody felt like they were being excluded or whatnot.
Great. Thank you. Item 7, receive and file the city's 3rd annual customer satisfaction survey results that were conducted with residents and businesses, which were based on the Net Promoter Score methodology and part of the city's strategic work plan. I see Mr. Lilio.
Good evening, Mayor Boyle, City Council members. We're going to be getting the consultant on the phone here. So this is the 3rd year that the city has conducted the annual customer satisfaction survey for both residents and businesses using the Net Promoter Score methodology. So John Dickey from Quality Solutions, this is the firm that conducts the survey for us. He will be providing a presentation to City Council. We should be getting up here momentarily. And there's some very, very positive, great news that he'll be sharing with City Council. And then we also have a presentation that's going to be going along with his verbal.
Let's see. Okay. Yes, we can see the screen.
Here, is Joe going to introduce me, or what are we going to do here?
Joe just introduced you, so you can go ahead.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is John Dickey. I'm president of Quality Solutions, and I am delighted to give you this feedback here this evening on both the resident survey and the business survey for the city of El Segundo. We're going to begin by giving you the feedback from the residents. All right. As we have done in the past, we conducted an online survey and supplemented that with also mail surveys that were sent out. In total, we had 593 responses to this survey, and that is up from our responses from last year. In total, we had a response rate of 14%, which is really quite outstanding when you think that fact that consumer surveys generally come well below 10% response rates. Moving on, we look at the fact that the survey process that we use is based upon the Net Promoter Score. Now, I know all of you have been part of these presentations in the past, but I just want to remind you that the Net Promoter process is a tool that allows us to understand the loyalty of your residents. I want you to think of it as the fact that these people that are very loyal to you, they are advocates of the city and of El Segundo. And we take all the people that are promoters of the city, which gave scores of 9 or 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, and we subtract out from that the percentage of respondents that gave scores of 6 or less, or that are detractors.
And from that, we come up with a Net Promoter Score of 52%. And I want to say to you that 52% is a very, very high score. In fact, in the private sector, when we're looking at corporations, anytime a corporation gets a score of 50% or so, that's considered also a very, very good score. In fact, a benchmark score in the private sector is probably any score of 60% or higher, okay? And we're talking companies like Apple, USAA, Chubb Insurance, very, highly reputable organizations. And you're right up there with them with this Net Promoter Score of 52%. When we compare your results, though, from last year to this year, we did see a slight drop-off of 5%, but that is within the margin of error. I want everybody to understand that's well within the margin of error. So it is slightly lower. I have to report on that, but I don't want you to get overly excited about that drop-off. I think it's something we have to keep an eye on, and so forth, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we might address that in a few moments. And that certainly we want to have, in terms of action plans for the city as it relates to the residents, there's two things I want you to do. One, I want you to promote all the good things that you're doing for the residents of your fine city. And there are many things that you've done very, very well at. And I think that there's a tendency among organizations, whether you're in the public sector, the private sector, profit, nonprofit, whatever, that there's a tendency that we have to only look at the negative side, okay? And I think you have to also look equally at the positive things that you're doing and letting people know and making them aware of all the fine things that are happening within the city. The other thing we want to look at here is the fact that your residents, in fact, actually saw that there were, 64% of the residents felt that they have seen some level of improvement in the last year. Now, that is an outstanding score by itself. The vast majority of time we see based on that type of question, the scores are running typically in around the 50% range or so, okay? That, people are a lot more passive about that. But you have 64% of your respondents are actually saying that they've experienced some improvement in the services offered by the city in the last year. The areas that we have seen that are strengths, that have overall scores, mean scores of 4 or higher, are the responsiveness and knowledge and competency of the fire and paramedic services, the maintenance and upkeep of your recreation facilities, the condition of your city infrastructure, the availability and responsiveness of the Fleets Department, the quality and recreation of the Recreation and Parks programs offers, and also the resources provided by the public library. There were really only 2 areas that ended up having scores that fell below the 4.0, and that was the responsiveness and overall vision of City Council and the water and sewer billing department and service areas. And that had to do with complaint handling and responsiveness. Now, there's going to be, I want you to understand here that those 2 areas may have been slightly lower, but they're still reasonably good scores overall. Now, the detractors, we did ask all of those people that gave scores of 6 or lower on the likelihood to recommend question. We asked them, well, what should we be, what might be the cause behind your scores? And we saw that and many of those individuals indicated it might to do with the cost of living, or too expensive, or it was possibly overpopulated or overdeveloped. Those were the things that came out as being the number one factor, followed by a desire to, they would like to see people, perception that the city leaders would listen more to the residents. Now, in the case of the first issue, cost of living too expensive, overpopulated, one of the things that I run into, for the last 20-some years in working with organizations, I always tell them, when you're getting feedback from customers, you have to understand that there are certain things that they may share with you that you have a significant amount of control over. And there are other areas that you may have lesser control over. And it's important that you understand those things and go into that with open eyes, but also recognize that, this is feedback that they're providing you, and you should be conscious of the feedback, but some of these things you just can't control, okay, in terms of taxes or whatever, all right? As it relates to the Net Promoter Score, again, and we've all seen this in the past couple of years, again, it's that score, based a score of 0 to 10. Detractors are on a scale of 6 to 0, passives are 7 or 8, and promoters are 9 or 10. And I want to introduce this new term to you on promoters. I want you to think of advocates. These are the people that they advocate. They're advocates for the city of El Segundo, and they're very proud of where they live. And so we see that 66% of those respondents are very proud of where they live. 20% are somewhat proud, and 14%, unfortunately, are not that proud, okay? They're detractors, if you will, all right? So when we come up with that Net Promoter Score, again, we're taking the delta of 66 minus 14 to come up with that 52% score. Now, I want to reinforce to you that when we look at other cities and municipalities, even in some cases counties that have used this survey process, and we've done a lot of research, even looking at organizations in New Zealand, okay, most recently, that the average runs in this mid-20 range. For you to have a score of 52%, that far exceeds that average and puts you in a level that is very unique amongst government organizations. And so that's something you really need to be proud of. And I encourage the city to publicize this. I would like to work with the city to develop a white paper of some sort to communicate all the fine things. And the fact that we have a 3-year track record on this is really, truly remarkable. All right? Again, when we do want to take a look at those areas for improvement, though, we ought to look at the comments that come back from the passives and the detractors and make adjustments accordingly. You can't address all the issues, but select those issues that you have the most control of and that represent opportunities for you to make some slight improvements, so that maybe you can move that 64% of the people that have recognized improvement since the last year, maybe you'll be able to move that up to 68% or even closer to 70%. Okay? As we've seen, your scores overall they have declined slightly, ever so slightly, from 2017 to 2019, but they are well within the margin of error year over year, and the fact that we do look at this as a point in time, and looking at the 2019 scores, I think in general those scores are, when compared against other cities, again, they're very, very good. You're far exceeding that of other government institutions at 59%. I mean, it's hard to find any government institution out there where the residents are giving any scores of even 45%. So, I think you all deserve a pat on the back for this. Again, though, the areas for improvement, as I've said before, comments of too expensive, overpopulation, overdevelopment. They want people to listen a little bit more to their residents, city beautification improvements. And I think some of these issues have, in fact, been worked on, but maybe possibly not communicated to the degree that some people might need. When we compare year over year, okay? The number of participants that you can see here has gone up. We had a 6.5% increase over 2018, okay? The Net Promoter Score was a slight decline of 5%, but the primary issues amongst detractors have changed a bit. Before, back in 2017, we had issues about public works and infrastructure. Back in 2018, it was too expensive at 21%. Well, it's only at 19% this year, okay? The attribute giving the highest score was the fire and paramedic services each year. And interestingly enough, from 2018 to 2019, it increased slightly. As far as the attribute with the lowest score, well, again, the responsiveness and overall vision of the city council is running in the lower range here of a 3.0. Now, I think, I know that, some of you might feel, well, what can we do about this? I get CEOs and other senior executives that have that kind of questions in their surveys with their employees when they're doing employee surveys. And one of the things I tell them is that how effectively are you, in fact, communicating these things out, these different areas out to the local community? And I know in my conversations with Barbara and others about a week or so ago, even talking about articles in the local newspapers or whatever the case may be, periodically, I think that might be helpful as well. Any questions that anyone might have with respect to the resident survey before we go into the business survey?
Yeah, Dr. Brand has a question, Don.
Yeah, John, how were the residents' responses obtained?
I'm sorry, say this again?
The residents who responded, how was that obtained? Were they mailed letters? Did they get it at the point of service? How did we get these results in?
Oh, how did we get the results in? Great question, okay. We received, the city provided us with an email list of all the residents, okay? And they have a database of all the resident email addresses. We sent that out, and now the list that they have is not all-encompassing. That's why we had to backfill it with a number of mail surveys as well. But you can see here that a final sample of customers will take. We sent out almost 1,700 email invitations. And of that 1,700 email invitations, 79 were undeliverable, okay? That's not very many at all. 17 opted out. So we had a good database here of about 1,600 names. And so then we also had mail surveys conducted, and we got feedback from about 287 residents via the mail survey. So a grand total of 593 people participated in the survey.
So you used emails and snail mail?
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got a quick question on, we've used this methodology in my business for, 15, 16 years now. And so the question is, a lot of times the way in which we address the residents or the businesses and their comments is very important. Just wondering what we do. What is our outreach method when someone voices a concern? Because the numbers are important, but the qualitative comments are often more telling. So, yeah, can you just explain the outreach we've done, Barbara?
So what we do is we review all of the results, and if there is contact information for the person, we'll reach out to that person. And if there's something that we can do to address that specific concern, then we do it. Bigger picture, though, we'll look at what the top items are that are of concern, and we'll take steps to improve that as a general
point of improvement for the city. So, overall, communication, for example, I'll speak to what I know. So we try to reach out more to the community. We've done a lot in communications. I could go on about that, but really looking at the general themes as well as some specific concerns.
Okay. So the one-on-one, like all the passes and detractors, they're not necessarily being contacted individually. Say, I know you had a concern about cost of living. It's not necessarily a city council issue, but we hear you loud and clear. Here's who you can. Are we doing that level of outreach? Probably not.
I have
right?
not yet this year, but I have done that. Yes.
Because in my experience, that affects the results for the following year.
Yeah.
Because people, when you hear responsiveness of council, oftentimes those are either issues when you read the qualitative comments that we don't necessarily directly.
Directly.
Yes, one of those.
Yeah.
Or we're not being as responsive in
Yeah.
terms of following up when they have a concern or a question from a following year.
Right.
Well, and what I was talking to the city manager about yesterday is maybe in our weekly or monthly newsletter, we have a section called We Hear You, El Segundo, and we just answer some of these questions on a regular basis so that people then feel comfortable coming out and asking questions, because maybe they didn't put it in their survey, but we answer a question, people go, oh, see, they are listening. And so it puts out a positive perception out there, and people feel then that they can come to us and ask questions. Because at the moment, if we don't reach out to them, they don't know. They may say, well, why bother? They're not listening. So maybe we create a section called We Hear You, El Segundo, and just, every month answer some question. Say we heard this, and this is what we've done, and we've just very simple.
Yep, it's a great idea.
And while you're up here, I just want to commend you. That's a huge uptick in respondents. So it's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, you asked a question about, Dr. Brand asked about where the information came from. We have that new Parks and Rec system. Are we capturing the information from that system as well as far as the emails, or are you just using the emails that you have that are on the, that receive the monthly newsletter?
So the finance department deserves most of the credit for the outreach. They used all of the emails that were in their system for the water billing, and then all of the addresses of people who did not have emails. That's correct. And then I provide all the context that I have, whether it's through what we've been building in GovDelivery, and we include that in the email list.
It'd be kind of nice if we actually used our Rex and Parks system to actually help push out or get that information, push that out, because a lot of families use that system. It could be getting a different data set.
I can work with Meredith. I'm not sure if in that system it denotes whether they're a resident or not. So there is that database and has lots of emails, but we don't want to reach out to non-residents either.
Well, they should if they're going to get a rec card. Wouldn't we have that identification for them to get a rec card?
I believe so.
Okay. And they should be doing validation of their residency as well. Correct?
Right, but everybody that does business on that software program
Yeah,
is
but
not
they should have a
necessarily
flag,
a
right?
resident.
That they have a rec card?
I believe so, and that's something that we'll have to look into.
I mean, I'm hoping we're doing validation for residency for rec cards.
One thing I think it's very important. I really am so pleased to hear about the what I call the closed loop process that you're talking about. What are we going to do with this information, and how are we going to, what are the next steps and so forth? Because that is so important. Following any sort of study, particularly these types of studies. And the one thing about the resident survey that is significantly different than the business survey, the resident survey is a blind survey. So you as a city don't necessarily know who says what, okay? So you have to look at the information more directional, okay, in terms of, what are some of the issues that are coming up, and the like. Whereas the business survey, we actually know who said what, okay, in most cases. In a few cases, they provided anonymous information. But the vast majority of the time, we have a pretty good idea.
Thank you. All right. I just want to reiterate one point that John made, which is the score that we got, while we did see a decline, is absolutely incredible. If you look at it relative to other industries, we're above most industries in North America in terms of our score. So it is an accomplishment, and I think most of that goes to the staff. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing, if I may. If you're interested, if you're a member of the public watching this or listening to this, if you're interested in being part of the survey, if you didn't receive it, go to elsegundo.org. There's a little pop-up box that comes up. It's put your email address in, submit it, and we'll have you on the list for next year. So we encourage everyone to put their email in.
Thank you. All right, we're just through the residents, so I know John wants to continue with the business part of the survey too. I don't think.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the business survey?
Yes, sir.
All righty. So the business survey was conducted exclusively online. All right, we sent out 3,800 invitations. Only about 79, 80 were undeliverable for a total, and a few opted out. So we had about 3,700 people that potentially could participate. And we had a 9.5% response rate, or 350 total responses, which is really a higher response rate than we had in 2018. I mean, that's just wonderful, okay, when you get that kind of response rate. Because, see, here's the thing to keep in mind. Response rate is another indication, it's a passive indication of how much goodwill you have with the business community. All right? Just want to think about that for a second. Now, again, this is the third year that we've done the Net Promoter Score for the businesses, and your score in 2019 is 54%, which is 7% higher than last year. Now, this is excellent. I mean, the fact that, I would have been delighted if it was just the same as last year, but you actually broke past 50%. You're in the mid-50s now at 54%. I just can't speak how happy I am for you, and you should be all very, very proud of yourself in terms of the accomplishments that you've had with the business community over the last year. The fact that, again, we compare that to the private sector, not the public sector, but the private sector, the companies that are getting the very best scores, we're talking top 2%, top 3% of all corporations in the country are in the range of 60 to 75%, and you're at 54%. That's just outstanding. And then when you compare it from 2017, your score has increased from 32% to 54% this year. That's unbelievable. That is truly unbelievable. Now, at the same point in time, though, we still have to look at developing some action plans for those few people out there that are discouraged, and identify where we can make some improvements. Now, detailed responses are provided as part of the report, and we gave in a separate file. Now, we had the number of attributes that we looked at. 4 attributes came in at scores of 4.0 to 4.33. That was business development and attraction policies, the business license renewal process, availability and responsiveness of the police department, and responsiveness, knowledge, and competency of the fire department, and field inspection. There were 2 areas that fell below 4.0. City zoning policies and responsiveness, knowledge, and competency of working with the planning and building and safety department for plan checks, permits, and inspections. By the way, those were low scores also the last couple of years as well. Now, the primary issues amongst detractors are staff responsiveness and business friendliness. So, these were instances where they felt, some people may have felt that they just didn't get their answers, back from these various departments fast enough, or they just didn't feel that the people that they were dealing with were very friendly to them, all right, or friendly to their issues. And those 2 issues made up only 6 out of the 350 responses. So, we got to be pretty careful about how we're looking at this. I don't want you to be
saying, oh my gosh, we have a whole series of issues out there. I mean, this is only a few people. But, you know, I just want to point that out. All right, again, the same process. And so 67%, 2/3 of the businesses in the city of El Segundo are promoters. They're advocates to your city. 13%, a very small amount, are detractors. The 20% are the passives that we'd like to move up a little bit and to get to those higher scores. This is just remarkable, though. Truly remarkable. I can tell you that of all the companies that we work with, you know, they would be delighted, you know, 80% of them would be delighted with these scores. All right, so now, again, I want to point out that secondary research, 23 to 28% would be net promoters. That would be clear down here in this area. Look at the gap where you're at. So again, I want you to understand here, though, that while we are all very proud of the accomplishments of the city and where you're at, you know, let's also take a step back and maybe take a look at a couple of areas for improvement. All right? And again, you can see, though, that those net promoter scores just kept rising and rising and rising over the years. And what happened? Fewer detractors and slightly fewer passives. But the main thing was is you drove down the detractors. I can tell you, that's pretty amazing, because usually what I see is years in which companies and organizations will drive down the number of passives, but you've actually drove down the number and the percentage of detractors. The issues that they came up with were business friendliness and staff responsiveness. A couple of people indicated it wasn't relevant to them. I think there were a couple of people that maybe were renters or something like that that might have felt like some of the questions didn't relate to them. They had rental properties there or something like that. And you can see these other comments. So how do we compare year over year? 8% improvement with the number of participants. The score, dramatic improvement year over year. Primary issue among detractors. The more business friendly was cut in half. I mean, you know, so that to 15%, that's great. And the highest score, the business license renewal process at 4.35, that's great. The score with the lowest, you know, the first couple of years it was zoning. Now it's the responsiveness, knowledge, and competency of working with the planning, building, and safety department at 3.64. But the interesting thing here, this I want to point out, if that was the lowest score at 3.64, the city, then the city zoning policy was higher than that. And so there's been a marked improvement in city zoning policies year over year. Okay? So I think that's really amazing. All right? So, again, you know, congratulations. You still have, you know, some opportunities for improvement there. Keep up communicating with the businesses. You know, I think there's been more in that area, and it's paid off for you year over year. Any questions? Any questions at all?
I have a couple questions, not necessarily related to the business component, but we had talked in the past, Joe, about doing transaction level MPS as well, and I think we might even have piloted a program in building planning and safety. Can you talk about that a little bit? If that's still continuing, where we're at with that?
So we actually worked with John's firm to provide that pilot program. There was iPads strategically placed within building and planning, and also at the business license counter and the utility, water sewer utility counter. Signs clearly pointing out, you know, please take the survey. It was on the iPad in a semi-private area.
We even had staff, after the transaction was done, requesting that the individual go and take the survey. It was very brief, less than 30 seconds of their time. We had very, very low participation rate.
One of the things we do in my company is we have phone calls or email right after a transaction. Because I think my guess is that people feel somewhat strange about taking it right then and there in the presence of the same office, the people they just experienced, and that they're more likely to be unfiltered and truthful via email or a phone call. Have we explored how we might be able to implement email on transactions? Because I was also thinking of Carol's point, Mayor Pro Tem, about Rec 1, the new software. We have all these people now in our system who we know they've taken a class, they've registered for the class, and then they've completed the class, and we should be able to figure out when that completion date is, send them an email, how was your experience as a parent or as a, whatever participant, and get feedback from that as well.
So we've been talking offline with John. So city manager's office and my office have been discussing this with John, coming up with some solutions and maybe some pilot programs. But another thing that you just touched on is more and more of our transactions are online now. So we have less manual, hands-on transactions here at City Hall or other city locations, and they are becoming more online transactions. And so we're talking about developing a program to capture that and send out a survey. Either it's, again, these are just preliminary phases, and maybe John could touch on it as well, but after they register and they get a receipt, there could be a survey link there. After they've finalized their class or their transaction, they can get a receipt again, and there'll be a survey link for them to take. I don't know, John, if you wanted to touch on
Joe,
that.
I'd like to add something to that, too. The aspect, we did try doing the kiosk sort of situation, and human nature is such that the people, they go in, they get the service done, and they want to get out of it. And I think someone brought up about the privacy aspect of having to go over, even if it's in a quiet area or whatever. Interestingly enough, the group that had of all the areas that had the highest response rate was the library, and I think it's because of the nature of the type of environment that it was. But we have a number of clients of ours that their businesses are in fact transactional type businesses, but they're transactional businesses in an online type of setting, or they're calling into a call center and information is captured electronically. And then what we have is the ability then to take that information and then send out an email invitation immediately based upon that triggered event. And so, that would be something we can look into down the road for the city. But the trick there is that you have to make sure that we don't inadvertently over-survey people. I know, I travel all the time, and, I get tired of all the email requests that I get from United Airlines, American, and Delta on every single trip and on every single leg of every single flight that I fly. And when you have 4 million miles on American Airlines, 2 million miles on United, that's a lot of emails, I'm telling you right now.
That's a lot of miles. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Any other questions for John?
No, the only question I have is more for future. We're going to be launching our new website this year, or I should say in January, and then hopefully in the near future we'll be launching our new building and planning system. So I want to make sure that we're capturing, when we develop the new the new questions, that we add questions to ensure that we're garnering information about those new systems and continue to do that as we launch new things within the city. So we should always be looking at, modifying the questions to ensure that we're encapsulating all the new things that we're adding to the city and making notes of them so that we can have a record of, hey, this is what happened during this time. That's why maybe we had a dip or made an increase. Because hopefully that the launch of the new website will really improve some of our communications to our residents and businesses.
Anything else? Just a couple
I
quick
hope
things.
I hope somebody wrote a note about that because I couldn't quite understand.
I see Barbara Voss
that
taking
comment,
notes,
but I heard,
plus it's being recorded.
I heard something about adding maybe another question to the survey or something. Is that correct?
Yeah, John, staff will bring you up to speed because everything's being video recorded right now as well. A couple quick things I want to add. One is I'd like to see a communication plan that outlines how we describe what we heard. To Carol's point, I think we have a really incredible opportunity. I think the last couple of years we haven't done enough with that. Second is
Okay, great.
Second is a plan on outreach to the individual passive and detractor comments. You know, if it's, hey, it's just not feasible. Yeah, if it's not confidential, but if we have that information, I don't care who calls, but it's, or emails, if there's a way to do it, I think, again, we're missing an opportunity. If we can't do it this year, possibly next year when we re-engage. And then, Joe, I'd love to hear more about the transactional NPS as this evolves. I think all of us would. So I think it's great. I commend all of you. It's a really innovative program for a government agency to take on, and I think we're getting some good feedback. So, and I know we use this for our strategic planning, all these comments. So thanks. Scott, did you have something?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to add in the last paragraph of the staff report, we are going to incorporate the outcome of these surveys in the city manager, city attorney, and department head annual performance reviews. So it is tied to compensation. So just want to point that out. There's an incentive.
Excellent. And we are doing an employee engagement survey as well, so that will, I'm sure that will be factored in as well, right? Great. Good stuff. Thank you. John, thanks for calling in.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Happy holidays to everyone.
You as well.
Really?
Okay, item 8. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Joe. Approval of $15,000 fiscal year 2019-2020 general fund budget appropriation for professional services to conduct single-use plastic survey of residents and businesses as recommended by the Environmental Committee. I know this has been in the works for quite some time, and I see Ken Berkman addressing the mic.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. At the November 1st Environmental Committee meeting, the committee supported a motion to survey residents and businesses to see their attitudes towards single-use plastics. Recently, 2 bills were introduced earlier in the year by the state to enact regulations to reuse and recycle 75% of single-use plastic materials sold or distributed in the state by 2030. Both of those bills stalled in the legislature, so they were not law. According to the South Bay Surfrider Foundation, about 1/4 of the municipalities in California have currently passed some type of legislation restricting the use of polystyrene, primarily the foam type products. These municipalities include our beach neighbors in Hermosa and Manhattan and Redondo, as well as Santa Monica and Los Angeles. The Environmental Committee is requesting that the council conduct a survey, that the city conduct a survey regarding the single-use plastics to get feedback from the community, as the staff report says, at an estimated cost of $15,000. And staff were recommending using Quality Solutions, again, to conduct the survey, since the firm already has done the Net Promoter Score surveys. And with your approval, it's anticipated we can complete the surveys by next February, and of course come back and share the results with council. So myself and Chair Tracy Miller-Zarnicki of the Environmental Committee are here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ken. I know that there's also a firm in town that volunteered conducting a survey for us, right, using our database. And I know that that's what they do for a living, market research. So are we able to engage, Mark, I don't know if this is a question for you or Ken, a firm that's offering to do pro bono work for us in terms of developing the survey, the methodology, everything but probably providing the database?
Potentially, I think we would still want to have an agreement with them and insurance requirements, those kind of things, and so that we're protected. But
if I may, there's a potential conflict of interest, though, because the chair has husband is the firm owner, I guess. So.
Do you view that as a conflict of interest?
The Attorney General has opined that even if something's done for free, if the government official has an interest in that service, that it's still a conflict.
Right, but because she's chair of the environmental committee, one could surmise that she wants to see single-use plastics banned, and therefore her husband might deliver those results. Is that?
Well, that's a different issue. This is more of conflict of interest for, even though there's no money being exchanged. There's an opinion on this, actually goes back to Scott's former city, where an attorney firm wanted to provide free legal services to the city, and the Attorney General said, because it will increase your exposure and whatnot, could lead to more business, so that it's still a conflict in that context.
I see. Okay. Yeah, Dr. Brown.
Why don't we forego the survey, save the money, and just ban the plastics? Just cut to the chase.
Yeah, I think the idea was, well, it's interesting you bring that up, because I brought forth support for a assembly bill that didn't get much support up here in the dais. Now, I was dialing in from somewhere else at the time. That was that was me. But I think the idea here is, and having been being the liaison for the environmental committee, the idea is let's hear from the business community and the residents,
Right.
and make sure there isn't some burden that we're not, aware of, for the businesses in particular, to have to adhere.
So the focus on the single use, is it just businesses and residents? Is it business and residents in the food services, or like, so for instance, I was at a Starbucks and I was ordering a lot of things because was with a bunch of dancers, and every food product that they had was in a single wrapper. So the guy must have opened like 20 different wrappers to do my order, which was quite large. But, are we talking about that type of stuff, that the packaging that's coming from the manufacturer or or are we just doing stuff that the consumer is going to be touching? So, I want to make sure it's comprehensive, because we say, oh, ban the straws, but then at the same time, they're sending all their food products in individually wrapped wrappers. It's a moot point. So I just want to make sure we're really going up the ladder as far as we should be, rather than just.
Well, the survey itself, a good question to focus on to that end is, which of the following eco-minded actions does your business already practice? And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 8 things that I asked: plastic bags, styrofoam, plastic straws, straws by request only, no plastic stirrers, stirrers provided on request only, no plastic utensils at all, takeout utensils provided on request only. So it's a pretty in-depth survey, and for council's recap, when the previous action, potential action came by to support the bill, before there was a separate business community letter that came in to say this, we don't necessarily support this. So that's why we think the survey itself is critical, to make sure we capture both sides of the equation there.
Yeah, and I would argue that we might get some results from the business community that they don't support it. We might opt to do it anyway. That's certainly something that we can contemplate. Do you want to add anything? I'm curious, either Tracy or Ken, to address Mayor Pro Tem's question. What is the most aggressive ordinance out there at a city level in terms of single-use plastics? I know you've looked at a bunch of different templates.
Good evening, everyone. Locally, Manhattan Beach is very well established, down to balloons. There's a lot of things that Manhattan Beach does that is, I would say, the most aggressive. I think in the state, I want to say someone in Northern California has surpassed that. It might be Berkeley at this point. But the point isn't to nitpick everything. It's sort of to start changing the culture and the practice, and start whittling down on some of these things that are easily replaced now with things that are more biodegradable and safer for our future. While I'm here, can I just be clear? The pro bono offer, I understand the conflict. It was more just a matter of, we don't want to spend $15,000 of the city money. I was like, when I saw that come up on the agenda, that was the cost, I'm like, why? I'm not sure why it would be $15,000. But anyway, ideally, our pre-thinking on this and partnering with the official allowed survey consultant would bring it down in cost. I'm not sure why it would cost that much. But anyway, that's all other discussion. So, yes, we would love it, Dr. Brand, if we could cut to the chase and just put it out there. But we have seen that in the past, council would like to know how our businesses feel before we impose changes. So we thought, okay, in this case, we'll take a step to speak to them directly. And, if it were feasible, the committee would walk around and talk to the businesses one-on-one. But I don't think that's permissible or feasible. So, that's just
Instead
one
of
step.
seeking permission, we should just beg forgiveness. If we put the ban on, then we let the people come up here and riot.
Yeah,
And,
Well, we don't want to do what the state of California did to us in regards to
Of
the
course,
housing.
this is called local control, right?
Right.
That's why we are talking about it as a local municipality,
Right.
not waiting for state to do or not do what they're doing, but to take action now to take care of our community, clean it up. A lot of us go out and do beach cleanups. We see a lot of this on there. I mean, if you look at Heal-the-Bay statistics, plastics are the #1 thing that come off of beach cleanup.
So
And
I
that's,
wanted to ask, so Amazon deliveries, you get a box, and they have those plastic things in there,
The puffy things,
Yeah,
yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
so what I'm saying is, we're making it harder for consumers and these restaurants where, their margins are so small, yet we're not going after the Starbucks in their shipping of their products or the Amazons. So I'm a little bit, I'd like to see, and that's, I know obviously they're bigger companies, but I just feel we're targeting our little guys, the little restaurants. It's hard for them to make margins, yet at the same time, the same person orders 10 boxes from Amazon and they don't seem to care that there's plastic in their Amazon boxes.
Of course, that's
So I
personal
just,
choice.
I think we just need to be really cognizant of not being oppressive and making sure that we're actually targeting the right audience.
Yeah, you might like to know that nowadays things are a lot more affordable in the alternative options. So it's not that oppressive. If we stop and do the upon request only, that should actually save businesses from throwing straws and plastic things into every single bag that comes out of their place. So, there are definitely cost savings to businesses, and now more affordable options if they choose to provide those options to their customers. So yeah, we can't take down Amazon and all their packaging and all that. I would love it if we could provide the actual blow-away plastic recycling in town here, that at this point you have to take your little bag to Ralph's or Target and put it in their bin because they can recycle that in a mass quantity that we don't do here. It would be wonderful if we could do that here on site. But, again, like even Edco only wants that if you package it up tightly so it's not going to jam the machine. It's just a process that isn't reachable at this level.
Have we thought about putting any type of recycling bins at our yards?
I don't know that we as a municipality can contract that way.
Okay.
I don't think we can. I think we have talked about this in the past.
Like collecting
That it's
plastic
a retailer
bags at the
such as
yards?
Kroger or Target, someone who on a big mass scale basis from their business can collect and send that in. But we do tell people to go to Ralph's or Target to do that in the meantime. So anyway, I'm all for not spending $15,000 to get this information to us. If we have a brilliant way that we're allowed to do it, and we can utilize the brains in this town that, already know how to do surveys and have, great experience with the topic and the process, I'm all for doing it inexpensively. I don't want to spend $15,000 for sure.
Yeah, we don't either.
So,
Can I ask you a question? The discussion at your committee level, did it start with, hey, let's propose something to have council vote on it, or did it start with, let's get a survey done and see if there's support so then we could take it to council? How did that
it
conversation
started
go?
with, what can we do in this city to make a change, to catch up with the rest of the world and take responsibility here? What can we affect here? Then we've revisited the past where we've presented things which, to be truthful, was not entirely this council, that was rejected because of how it might impact our city and is not really a city decision to make. as much as we want to talk about local control, this actually is. So the idea of surveying businesses specifically actually came from getting the Restaurant Association letter saying, have you talked to your businesses? Which we said we would definitely, in our discussion was we would definitely want to do that, however we can officially do that. I can tell you that Manhattan Beach went out and talked to grocers and restaurants and found no resistance to making these changes. And they even allowed for exemptions in their policy. If it was a financial hardship, there was a way that they could apply for exemptions. Nobody has claimed that in Manhattan Beach. They've all gone with the flow, made the change. So we would love to just present you with a checklist of all the things that Ken was mentioning that we've brainstormed of, how about straws? How about utensils? How about this that you could consider and, opt to either do all of them or none of them or some of them. But again, we were trying to come with information gained from speaking to our businesses directly so that when you ask, how's it going to impact our little guys and even our bigger guys, we would have that information already.
Could there be a compromise, Tracy, where we start with a baby step of straws on demand only for now until we get everything else in line?
Any step in the right direction
Either
is
straws or
thankful.
plastic utensils on demand.
Yeah.
I mean, if you present it that way, to me, that's a business savings opportunity
Yeah.
right out of the gate.
Is that something we could take action on this evening, Mark, or no?
No, we need to bring back an ordinance for you. We would need to prepare the regulatory document.
That just seems like low-hanging fruit. Potential saving for the business, a win for you all. I mean, I feel like we need to do more environmentally. We are behind. That's my personal opinion. I can't speak for the rest of the council. And I agree with Don. I mean, I do want to hear from the businesses. At the same time, I want to take action on this issue. So
Yeah.
maybe
that-
there's a compromise there. While we're doing the survey, we eliminate
And if we
single-use
could,
plastic
group
straws.
this into a planned other survey, so again, again, I don't want to get to 50,000 survey emails either. So if there is a city survey in general about other topics, I'm sure there's other things you want to know, how people feel about. It could be part of that discussion. But for sure, I think if you take some of these actions as a cost-saving measure for businesses, right there, that's easy enough to swallow.
Okay. What do you think, Ken?
So next meeting, we're looking to come back with a proposed ordinance to ban straws and utensils. Is that what I heard?
And just for
Upon
clarification,
request,
if there's an event, someone's throwing a big party or, like the gala, and we have plastic forks there, I mean, this would not be part of that ordinance, right?
Not going into somebody's house, no. I mean, this is a food service and,
But
grocery
it's
service.
so like we have if there's the Ed Gala, there's
Yeah,
lots of
I've been to
plastic
that.
forks there.
Biodegradable forks, not that expensive. Just raise your prices.
Yeah, we as the environmental committee have boundless suggestions for how to green up things. And honestly, a city leading by example is really a beacon of light. So it would be nice if we could take efforts to not use plastic bottles. And, there are small ways to start showing that change can be done and not be unbearable. I think we've all, I can't tell you how many people have come to me now and said, wow, this sorting makes me really aware of how my waste trail is, like now that I have this bin for green and this bin. So just, again, awareness and changing the culture and changing the practice will move us in the right direction.
Quick anecdote today, surfing the jetty from the jetty to the old refinery that's being torn down, or the power units, the old ones. I stopped at 15 pieces of trash. That's just one little quick walk, and I could have picked up more. So there's always an abundance of plastic on the beach, especially after rain.
Yeah, that's not a surprise, especially
Yeah.
after rain. Yeah, last week and what's coming right now. So
Yep. Okay, so you have what you need? We have okay, we have to make a motion on the survey. Okay, Chris.
I tend to agree with Dawn on this. Maybe a slightly different color. This quite clearly is advocacy being couched as a data gather, which I feel like is somewhat disingenuous and not the business we're in. I think that we kind of clearly know the issue writ large. There's a reason that a governor vetoed this, right? Disproportionate, did not make it through committee. So there are clearly the issues at hand. I think we know the attendant issues, and if there's steps that we're comfortable taking, then let's create those. But I feel like spending $15,000 dancing around an issue where no one likes to see a whale full of straws, right? And no one wants to see a small business put out of business because of they're trying to come up with a useless biodegradable straw too. So there's a happy medium. I think this community deals well in happy mediums and sort of common purposes. So I think if there's a sensible step we can take, why don't we just go to that and save the $15,000? Because I don't think, I mean, I'm not a statistician, I'm not a data gatherer, but if our intent is to get to a future where we have less of these products, then nibbling around and sort of couching awkward questions to people just doesn't seem like the way to do it. Let's just say, hey, business community, we're having this meeting, it's an agenda item, our staff says we can not give out forks at over-the-counter restaurants, come make public comment, burn our ears up, tell us if you like it or don't.
Yeah, I would prefer, my personal opinion is we go for the low-hanging fruit, like prohibit straws on demand, and we still survey the business community, because I think we need to hear from them. We might be missing some opportunities that we're not aware of. Like, do we have a good grasp, for example, on how many of our businesses or residents have solar installations? I'm not sure. Maybe the planning department does. That seems like low-hanging fruit. There are other things that we can do from an environmental standpoint that we could probably capture through this survey, other than just how cost prohibitive is this going to be for your business? Because I don't think that's really the intent. I think it's to demonstrate that we do care, we listen to our business community, we want to hear what they have to say, but we might not necessarily, we'll still go forward with some form of reduction, I guess is right, reduction essentially. But so I think we're saying the same thing, Chris. It's basically, although I don't know if you're a fan of the survey, but I'm saying take a step at the next meeting, ideally, or at least consider one where we reduce straws and some other single-use plastics on demand only, and do a survey to at least demonstrate that we're listening to our business community. We care what they have to say.
I think it would be well worth it to have a survey that might be slightly more general to the business community. And that could be, I mean, there's things out there that have a much bigger impact on them, probably than this. Green building standards are a big train coming, right? And that is a huge issue for development, depending on what new green building standards go in. So that, solar, obviously we just won an award for that last time about the way we changed some of our zoning measures to make it easier to put up solar panels. So if we want to have a general, hey, businesses, what are your environmental impact concerns? What are your, whether it's cost concerns or energy efficiency or battery storage or any of these sorts of things, I think that's an incredibly valid one. But if this is a single issue piece around an issue that we already kind of broadly have some consensus around, I would rather, not fiddle with the scalpel on something that we kind of already have our hands around. And if there's a bigger piece, like, let's go after that and find out what are things that they are comfortable with that we don't realize they're comfortable with. Does that make any sense? I don't know.
Yeah, we, as you might recall from May, the big work plan that we presented has many, many realms of environmental things that we think we could do in the city. It would be great to test the water on much more than just this issue. This was just a means to see if this issue is business friendly enough to be accepted in this town.
I wonder if COG has money for environmental programs. I wonder if there are any funds available to help us with a grant on the survey itself. I mean, no? Did you already exhaust
the
that?
COG will help. There's a grant for setting up a green business program within a city.
Couldn't this be a step to move in that direction potentially?
And some of these questions would fall into that realm naturally. We have started conversations with the chamber about seeing if they would like to partner on that.
Okay. All right, so
But for now.
sounds like, do we have consensus on approving a survey to be defined? Like, you're going to come back potentially with, Scott?
I don't think we'd spend the money on the survey for a couple different reasons. One reason particular being the time of year and the minimum wage hike that all these small businesses are going to experience as of January 1. Being a small business person, former small business person, if you handed me a survey right after I just started paying all my staff, $1 more per hour, you're not going to get the results from that. You're not going to get the right answer from me. You're going to get the answer which would be, what else are you going to throw at me? You're trying to bury me, and not to be funny, but like the straw that breaks the camel's back, like if, depending, it's all about the timing of things. And, being a sociology major, the concept of surveys, it's you want to, in a vacuum, right? You want to be able to ask these questions in a perfect environment. And I'm telling you, if we put this survey into action right now and it goes out in the first quarter of 2020, the entire survey will be skewed simply based upon.
So what do you
my
recommend?
opinion.
Like for me, in
I-
my small business, we've already started anticipating that a year ago. Because
Yeah.
that's ship sailed, you know. We're already raising prices to address
I
minimum
would
wage
call you like a
increases.
medium business. You're not. I mean, small. We're talking mom and pops. I'm talking like the Richmond Street Bar and Grill of the world. These are. I know they're well ahead of it, but that's why I'm just saying that $15,000 for a survey. I mean, I would rather spend $15,000 of the city dollars on more Rex and Park programming. I mean, that's an entire new event for the city at $15,000.
So just so I'm clear, you're saying don't survey, or you're saying
don't
find a
survey.
different
I'm
way to
sitting here
survey?
waiting to ask Tracy, how can I make a motion to not approve? Or do I actually have to make a motion to approve to then have us not vote aye? Like, that's all I was thinking.
Okay, let's break this down. Do we have consensus on asking the environmental committee and Ken, Director of Public Works, as liaison to the environmental committee, to come back to us with a ordinance to consider to reduce single-use plastics like straws, et cetera, giving people the option to, they have to ask for it essentially. Do we have consensus on that?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. So we have that solved.
Progress now.
Yes, slowly but surely. And I thought this was going to be a short meeting this evening. Not really. Okay, Scott, so then what do you want to propose then? You're saying no survey at all, just don't ask the business community?
What
or-
is being asked before us today, right? Direct staff to conduct a survey of residents, business owners, and authorize $15,000. My recommendation is to make a motion to pass on this. Is that what you said, Tracy?
So if you don't have a motion and a second, it fails.
Okay, so
It's usually though in the staff report, it's or alternative actions related to it. So you could form some other opinion.
So
No,
I
I'm
think
saying, yeah, you could provide other direction.
So if I understand this correctly, the mechanics of this is I'm going to make a motion. If none of you second it, it fails. Then we can direct
Go
staff.
for it. Yeah, you can do that.
I'll make a motion to approve agenda item number 8.
So just so I'm clear, you're approving. Okay. I'll second that.
You weren't
Yeah.
supposed to.
I am. I'm approving the survey. Yeah, that's my opinion. All in favor? Aye. Okay, 1-4. That's fine. Okay, now make a substitute motion.
So now we can.
So-
Can we
alternative
task a
action.
committee?
Yeah, we are here for your,
So I would,
we are at your.
so I personally, I actually would like to give money to have them do outreach to our businesses, like to create some messaging, some materials to say El Segundo really wants to, have a volunteer program of people trying, and work with our businesses and partner with them and, somehow create committees within the business community saying we have a restaurant committee or we have a light manufacturing, and work together and just at least let them know that we are doing this with them and as a partnership and come up with ideas and rather than mandating it. I think sometimes people don't know to do it, and if they know that we're in the frame of mind that we want to become more sustainable and reduce
So
our
are you proposing like a working group, like a task force of the business
and creating
community?
marketing materials that's push because perception's everything, right? So if they think, hey, El Segundo we have to be more recycle focused, maybe they'll do it.
'Cause just quick math. I mean, the reality is the fully burdened rate of our employees is about $100 an hour. So we're talking about not that many hours to get to $15,000. 150 hours to go out and survey. So I applaud the effort. I actually think a survey is a pretty cost-effective method of surveying the business community and demonstrating that we listen. I think your method is incredible. If we have the resources to do it, and we actually have a task force, and we work with the business community, and we're sure that we've got everyone pretty well represented, at least statistically significant. I think, but I don't know that we have the resources to do that given everything else we have going on right now, especially with the time of year. So I'm looking at the survey as a way, again, to demonstrate that we want to hear what they have to say and that we want to do more than just what we've just approved a few minutes ago.
Well, okay, so, I look at businesses in town that, want to be sustainable, like Beyond Meat. Let's just pick them. They're a company that prides themselves on creating a product for sustainability. And, if we went to Beyond Meat and said, hey, Beyond Meat, you have people in your organization that are marketeers, they develop programs, ad materials. Would you work with us in developing something for the city and that we can use? I'm sure they would say yes, and this is goodwill for them. So it's getting our businesses working with us to help, educate El Segundo on how to be sustainable.
Yeah, and actually, Manhattan Beach, again, has generously said, you can take all of our stuff and just replace Manhattan Beach with El Segundo, and that would be your educational packet right there, almost pre-made for us. They're very willing to share straight from what they've created and have taken to their businesses for education and alternative
How many hours, tell us, what did the outreach cost them in terms of
them?
hours and time?
I cannot tell you. They have
I'm guessing it was over at least 6 months, probably.
They have committees within city staff and actual environmental staff, people that do this, so that's part of what makes it easier for them to do this. So it's different. I am all for recycling as much as they have created to save us the time, money, and staff, especially, effort on this.
What if we just challenged a kid at the high school that's in stats? They have stats at the high school? They must, right?
Yeah, they do. AP stats.
To put together a survey using SurveyMonkey, even though Mark Hensley hates SurveyMonkey, or some other medium. I thought you told us we couldn't use that before. Anyway, some validation by someone to ensure it's statistically significant. We got a good sample size, and we just go with it. And because I think $15,000 is a real pain point for people on the dais here, and I understand that.
Is the concern the price? If the concern's the price, then we can do a SurveyMonkey thing on our own. We will spend more than $15,000.
I'm hearing price, and I also heard from Scott that the time of year is not going to be good because everyone's dealing with the minimum wage increase, which is a top-down state mandate. I don't have that same concern, but because I also don't want to wait for the environmental committee. They've been waiting quite some time on this issue. So could the council get behind a survey at no cost to the city to achieve the same objectives?
I'm not sure if Manhattan Beach already has the marketing material, and we just have to understand what that marketing material says, and then we could just take that.
Who's gonna do all that? Are we gonna form another task force? I don't think.
I
Is
think
the
the
environmental
committee
committee willing to go
we have
around?
graphic design people on committee
There are-
to do it, but
there are-
there are plenty in town. So.
Can I interject?
There's an outreach component. I think that we're underestimating the outreach component of going and having conversation. We all went door to door. That is a time-intensive process, and again, I'm not quite sure if the adversity, we're talking about the survey as a pain point or the cost, but I think we need to make some progress. It's almost 9 o'clock.
Yeah, we're all for educating people, however the least expensive and most efficient way to do it is. But
Okay,
I
Scott,
think you wanted to
if
say
the
something.
council is on board, do you have a way, do you feel like you can fathom a way to create a survey at no cost to the city that's going to be statistically significant, relevant?
Short answer, yes. There'll be an indirect cost of staff time, but as far as asking for an appropriation, we can work our way around that.
I guess a better question, though, Mayor.
Ask your question. Your mic's not. Oh, there it is.
Sorry, a better question is, you asked all of us if there was a consensus that we would like the environmental committee and staff to bring back something for us, and there was a 5-0 consensus on that. So I don't know if you can answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Is there anything that could come back in the results of a survey if we agreed to spend $15,000 on a survey that would change your position?
Yes, because right now all we're talking about doing is, again, the low-hanging fruit. Like, give people an option on straws. That's different than saying no straws, which, by the way, Starbucks has already taken on. Not yet. They haven't implemented it, but they've committed to no
Yep,
straws.
they still have the
LA,
packaging of
LA
the fruit.
City, I believe,
I can't
has already
remember. Okay,
has
maybe
the
it's not
straws on
national.
request.
So yes, I do think
around
if
it.
the survey
They
is
still
designed
package
correctly, we'll absolutely get different information than we're getting by making this decision tonight, which is going for the low-hanging fruit. We know straws are an issue. Let's make it on demand only. So, yeah.
If we only get 9% participation in a survey, that's pretty dismal, though, I must say. I'm not excited
It needs
about
to be.
it.
It needs to be
I
a
know
good
it's
sample
different.
size, right? It needs to be representative of the population at large. Absolutely.
Right. I just, that would hardly be worth the effort if we
let me-
only
let-
got 9%.
May I, Mr. Mayor, members of council, let me throw a suggestion. How about you direct us to the city manager's office? We'll work with the chair of the committee and the public works director, other applicable department heads, and see if we can come back with a more palatable game plan for you. I hear what the objective is, to move in a certain direction. It may make the survey a moot point, but let us regroup and come back with something that's a little more clear, because you're in an awkward position right here. If you want to direct us to go promote the use of avoid the use of single-use plastics, we can do that. But I'd rather sit down and hammer it out. And if Manhattan Beach has something we can emulate, it's relatively painless, then we could come back and recommend that. Sorry for lack of
As
clarity.
long as we talk to the business community through some medium before we implement change.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If that helps, I throw that out as an
Chris,
option
go
to
ahead.
help save some time.
I think if we're going to go to the business community and say we want big greeny changes, why don't we get the big and the whole enchilada of, I don't want this thing focused necessarily on straws. It could be like, what do you dread? I dread electrification. Okay, tell us why. Something like that. So we know when we get up here what are the prime movers that we're dealing with, so we don't spend 9 hours talking straws when the big issue is 550 kilovolts.
Totally agree. That's what Scott asked. It's like you don't know what you don't know. We don't know what the business community is feeling about the environmental situation of El Segundo because we've never asked them.
That's correct.
Let's ask them.
Okay, well, so we're doing business license renewals happen January 1st. So all of that's online. Why can't we attach a survey to the business renewals? And then it doesn't even cost us any money.
It's a great idea. Is Joe still here?
We can do that. We want to. The answer is yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The answer is yes. We want to make sure it's done in a statistically accurate way. But sure.
I mean, we're doing outreach to every business in town for January 1st. I think the letters were going out. I think the notification. So they're going to be going into our system to pay that business tax.
Through the mayor, what about the residents?
Oh, good point. Yeah, forgot the residents are involved too. Yeah, and the idea there is, can you give us a little more flavor on that? Because we've been talking exclusively
Well, every
on
resident should be
businesses.
renewing their rec card January 1st.
Yeah, as far as the residents go, it was more to sense what their concerns are environmentally. We know from unofficial, how do you feel about no smoking in public bans that have gone out, large support to go big with that. So we have seen some of these topics unofficially sampled that way.
Did we ever implement the no smoking on our beach? Did we implement that?
No
'Cause I
smoking
know-
beach.
I don't think you can smoke on our
parks-
beach. I think
our
that's not a
parks have
county
no smoking,
ordinance.
so if the beach
Okay.
is under that jurisdiction, if it were enforced, El Segundo Beach is county. So we don't have that. But anyway, we have seen some residential expression of concerns and desires, but we have, again, never sampled it officially.
Okay, so y'all are going to come back next council meeting with an ordinance recommendation and some more context around a survey or other mechanism to hear from our people and make it broader in nature, as Chris suggested, and right?
And not spend $15,000.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, to you
Hey,
and your
progress.
committee. It's really amazing, though.
It's an important conversation. I mean, I know we belabored it, but
And one of the things we had talked about was having the, your committee, the environmental committee, part of the planning, building, and anytime there's a new development or there's a new, initiative that you are brought in to have dialogue, is that happening as well, or no? So, I mean, that's something we as a city we talked about before, about
Are you talking about the staff reports or the environmental consideration? Because I know Scott Mitnick's working on that, but that's still not there yet. Or are you talking about more than that? Because that's one thing we talked about that has not been put in place yet,
Yeah,
that we all agreed upon.
We all agreed to bring in the environmental committee more into the process so that we can start having proposals on how we approach things.
Yeah, and that was part of our big work plan was governance should have that thought of environmental impact on everything we do, since
Right.
it affects the world we live in. So,
Well, and I feel
you know.
that if we're going to impose any type of ban or constraint to our residents and our businesses, then we ourselves, as a city, should be ensuring that we are as environmentally sound as possible.
Yes, leading by example would be lovely. Yes.
Exactly. So Scott, can we make sure that
Right.
that's been implemented?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, yes. And I did see I did dig up the staff report, and we talked about it at E-Team on the environmental consideration. And do know that we're spending time at the department head level talking about how we can alter and enhance our day-to-day practices, whether it's alternative fuel vehicles or looking at how we heat and cool buildings and all of that. And to lead by example as well, I know there's been some resistance here, but the type of vehicles that we're driving, we can send a very clear message to the community if we're using alternative fuel vehicles. I've been in organizations where there was a very clear direction to have like 70% of the city fleet an alternative vehicle, so alternative fuels. So there's a lot of things that we can do.
Well, I think, in many corporations, they task, and I know they did this at the school district, where they tasked one person to be their environmental person, and they just went around looking at processes, looking at how day-to-day operations are, how lights, sensors, if there's sensors on the lights, and that they saved the school district quite a bit of money. Because I know, I'm trying to remember, it was Luca Leschig that did it at the time, but
It was a while ago.
yeah, they did it, and they found a lot of opportunity to save the city a lot of money. So maybe that would be kind of something we should think about as far as tasking one of our employees to be that environmental person to go through each department, look at how we function, look if there's opportunity for.
But I want to make one comment. I appreciate that. I think I made a somewhat compelling argument the last couple of years to have environmental included in the strategic plan, and I didn't get favor or support on that. So I'm really happy that we're actually moving in this direction. Let's take a baby step, though. Let's get this win under our belt, and let's empower the environmental committee and staff to come back with other recommendations once we've demonstrated that we actually are going to take some action on this. Because there's probably tons of low-hanging fruit, Carol, I would imagine. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
All right, item 9, Library Board of Trustees requests authorization to oppose publisher policies implementing waiting periods before public libraries can purchase more than one copy of newly released eBooks. Hello. Did you lose your director of libraries too? Or
No, she's here.
Oh, she's back there. Hey, Melissa. Awesome. Hi, sir. Yeah.
Hi. Good evening, Council. My name is Sarah Whalen, and I am the current president of the El Segundo Library Board of Trustees.
And I am Christina Cora Beckman, a Teen and Adult Services Librarian at the El Segundo Public Library.
At our November 12th meeting, the board unanimously voted to join dozens of libraries around the country by taking a stand against Macmillan Publishing's unfair business practices. Macmillan is currently implementing waiting periods of 8 weeks before public libraries can purchase more than one copy of a newly released ebook. The Library Board of Trustees requests authorization to oppose publisher policies limiting public library access to ebooks. We are also asking you to consider signing the statement on equitable public access to ebooks from the Urban Libraries Council. An example was included in your agenda packet. Christina has worked very hard on this matter, and I'll allow her to elaborate further.
Okay, so kind of give you guys a little recap. Starting November 1st, Macmillan imposed the embargo Sarah mentioned on libraries across the country, where libraries, regardless of size, are restricted to purchasing only one copy for the first 8 weeks after a book is published. So large rural systems, or systems like ours that are part of a digital library consortium only get one copy to share across all of our patrons, which can result into waits of up to a year for popular titles.
So after 8 weeks, libraries can purchase additional copies, but they're usually limited access, which means they're only good for 24 months or a limited amount of checkouts, usually about 24 to 52, after which we have to purchase the items again. So libraries already, in case you didn't know, pay up to 5 times the amount for the cost of a retail ebook or their print counterparts, so having access further restricted is definitely troubling. So one of the core tenets for our public libraries is free and equitable access for information for everyone. So Macmillan's policy blocks our ability to provide that access to our community. The policy also disproportionately affects patrons with disabilities and those that need large type. Large type books are mainly bestsellers. There is a special type that gets made for popular books. So not all the books get made into large type. And also if they do get made into large type, there's usually a delay from when the book is originally published so they can make that large type. So for a lot of people where that's the way that they access is through eBooks, the further delay is just one more barrier for them to get the information that they need. So for the patrons that can't use print copies, eBooks being their only means of access because they can alter the size, the font, or the line spacing to meet their visual challenges or learning issues. People with visual impairments or learning disabilities, they have a lot of assistive technology that integrate with the eBooks that you can't use on a print book. So this also sets a dangerous precedent for other publishers following suit, and we definitely want to try and block that as much as we can from going forward. Libraries are critical connectors between authors and readers. We're collaborators, not competitors, that bring indispensable value to the marketing of books and developing readers in our communities. We believe taking a stand against restrictive publisher policies is necessary to ensure access to information for all. What others are doing in the library community for the movement. For example, to date, more than 220,888 people have signed a petition circulated by the American Library Association on the website ebooksforall.com. Also, other library systems in California, including Sacramento, Yolo County, Victorville, in addition to other libraries across the country, are also embargoing Macmillan titles, ebook titles. Also, more than 90 mayors and county leaders have assigned the Urban Library Council statement on equitable public access to ebooks that we were asking you guys to consider also joining. Another great article that came out actually in the LA Times, an opinion piece by the LA Public Library City Librarian John Seisbo and also Sky Patrick, the LA County Director Library, had a great opinion piece about how it threatens the essential democratic services of equity, opportunity, lifelong learning, and access that we all as librarians support. There's also a great piece by San Francisco's city librarian, Michael Lambert. It's in October 30th in their San Francisco Chronicle that also talks about insight to how the digital content restrictions affects the communities that we serve. So what sort of actions are we asking for you guys? As Sarah mentioned earlier, we would love if you would authorize library board to authorize to oppose publisher policies limiting public library access to ebooks, and also, if appropriate, consider signing the Urban Library Council statement on equitable public access to ebooks. So thank you for your time. That ends our presentation, but we are available for questions.
Council questions or comments?
The only publisher here is Macmillan, and what's their reaction to the pushback? We did include in the packet, there was a letter from the CEO of Macmillan. So they claim that they've been doing a lot of research about basically the market effect that libraries have on their bottom line. And so basically the letter says, we hear you, but we have some basis of fact that we want to do this test and see what happens. So, and there's other responses from ALA were saying, well, we never saw this research. We'd love to see it, and then get to our research shows a different sort of perspective about how the impact we have on promoting things for free with all of our author talks, and every time we promote a book and put it on display and recommend people read it, we're encouraging sales in that regard. So
their argument is centrally that digital books are easily pirated, right, and that they're not getting the amount of fully compensated impressions that they would from hard copy. Is that they discount the ebooks by 75% or something, but they're not. Their claim is that they're moved around so quickly that they're not getting the sort of compensation they would if they were hard copies. Is that right?
Actually, what they're saying is that since libraries circulate books for free instead of someone buying it, that we're eating into their market share, that they would buy the book legally from somebody else if they didn't check it out from the library. And our counter argument to that is we already pay 5 times the amount of the cost to the consumer, and then we have to keep rebuying the same books over and over again, which we don't have to do for print books. They kind of have, a monopoly on the industry for ebooks because they have the DRM and you have to download their proprietary software to read the book. Where a print title, you buy it, you can share it around, you can have a used book market, and they don't have control over the access of that, but they do for ebooks. So they do it because they can.
Wait, they really have a monopoly, Macmillan? They have what share of the ebooks?
All the publishers have monopolies on ebooks. So the only way that libraries can provide access for our patrons is to buy copies from the publishers themselves and provide access through platforms like Overdrive.
Okay,
or Access.
but Macmillan, what share, like,
It's one
how
of the
many of
five.
your
There's
books,
5 big ones.
how many of the ebooks are Macmillan versus other publishers? If you had, like, what percentage of?
So we don't have a percentage for you. They're just one of the 5 biggest.
And
and
you're
we're not
concerned that the others
arguing-
will follow suit, essentially, as well?
That is the worry, right? The Library Association has been in conversation with them for, probably 8-9 years. Lots of arguments about price because they charge up to five times the amount as a consumer would pay. We understand that the price should be higher, but what we are really arguing is just not even be able to buy them at whatever price. The limit of the 1 copy is the one that is non-negotiable in our
Got it.
minds. If you look at the stats, especially for the larger systems like LA County, where they have millions of customers, and to have 1 copy is just, it's going to ruin the model of libraries. So it doesn't affect us, our system, nearly as much, but it does affect libraries in general, and so we want to be supportive of the model and make sure that continues even in a digital world.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. Don, did you have a comment? I saw you.
So you're boycotting purchasing Macmillan's books for the remainder of this month at least?
Our plan is to not purchase Macmillan books until the beginning of the year, and other library systems are doing that as well.
Okay, I was
just
gonna
to
ask.
see what they do, if there is this objection to their business policy, if they'll reevaluate it.
So there's a California Reading Association and a California School Librarians Association. Have they weighed in on this?
So it's interesting, they aren't doing it for school libraries. They have an exception. They also, I think, tried to get smaller library support by lowering the price for the first copy to try to get them not to oppose the policy. But again, we're trying to think bigger picture and really think philosophically about what this really means for people who can't afford to purchase books.
Can you use that fact that they're not doing it for schools, since we're connected with the schools, to solve our city's libraries
So we
problem?
thought about that, but actually you would have to have a completely different access. We pay for Overdrive to provide books through our system, and we'd have to do the same thing for the schools and build a collection over there. We've already invested a lot in building the collection for El Segundo Library. Correct? We verified that, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the other thing,
sorry, excuse me.
is that second account for the schools would be restricted to school students. So any person that wasn't a school student through El Segundo, verified through library card, would not have access. So. Interesting.
Okay, any other questions for? No?
I think it's fascinating. I know nothing about libraries and the economics of it. They make pretty clear that the first 8 weeks of a publication is where they extract the most revenue from something. So I'm surprised they make it available to libraries at all, if that's the case. If they think they're going to extract all the value in those first 8 weeks, that why they would make it available for lease at all. I don't know. I guess that's not so much a question. I'm just sort of flummoxed by the entire construct.
It's kind of like the movie industry with the rentals.
It's almost like the movie industry with rentals, 30 years ago, like with Blockbuster. But this isn't quite like Napster, where it's not as though something is destroying the industry as we know it. It's just library specific.
And it is, 100 years
or more of library history where it has been a collaborative public good. You know, there's a lot of conversations. Would a public library be created if we tried to do it today? Probably not, but that's why we need to retain the model because of all the good that it does in our mind. It is interesting, though, because I think there's going to be probably legislation. American Library Association is working with members of Congress to address this at an even a higher level. So there'll be more to come in the coming year for sure.
That seems like a really good use of Congress's time. I would ask this: Are we?
It is if you believe in libraries.
Is there a number of digital copies that we are seeking that they make available, or is it unlimited number of digital copies that we can buy as many impressions as we want?
It really should be in our minds unlimited.
However many you
I
wanna
mean,
order.
the larger systems buy 700, 800, 900 copies of the bestsellers in order to provide access to their customers. So we don't think there should be an upper limit of how many. Again, the price is negotiable, but the fact that there shouldn't be restrictions on how many items we can buy.
I've
I
got
have a
nothing
simple
further.
question, kind of related, but so if I have a lot of eBooks in my library, I can't donate those, can I?
Not currently because of the way that we provide access to eBooks, and it is this proprietary system. There's a few vendors out there, so that is also a complication because right now we can accept donations of printed
eBooks.
materials, but and it is also interesting, like DVDs and CDs go out hundreds of times without an issue, and then this ebook is 26 times is the license for it. So it is impacting collection development for all libraries for sure. But again, if you look at the stats from the paper today, circulation for the larger systems, it's between 45% of all of their circulation is digital resources. So that is the trend as it's going. So if this doesn't change, it could crush it.
Scott, did you have something?
I was just thinking that we interview individuals and we put them on boards, and when they bring things to us that they voted unanimously on, thank you so much for answering our questions, but I am fully in support of your efforts and willing to assist in any way, shape, or form.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions? Okay. You want to make a motion, Scott?
I'm just gonna let the
I'll make a
educator
motion
make the motion.
to approve.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. City Clerk reports.
Questions are more about like the economics. Like, wait, what?
Yeah, just like to remind the community that the VSAP demo center opened today at the clubhouse. Come and check it out. You can visit Tuesday through Friday from 11 to 8 and Saturdays from 11 to 5. Did she say 10?
said 10.
She did say 10, didn't
Yeah.
she? So possibly you can get there as early as 10. But council came out tonight and we all played around with it and found it to be pretty easy. So hopefully the community will go out and feel the same way.
Great. So this is actually like a mock voting setup, right, in the clubhouse to go experience the new voting system? Awesome. Thanks, Tracy.
Yeah, demo center for
Demo center, okay.
the I have to learn all new acronyms, ballot marking device.
Great. Thank you. Okay. City Treasurer is not here. I don't see any representatives. Okay. Councilmember Pimentel.
I have nothing to report.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Nickel.
I just want to invite the community out to the Hyperion Council meeting tomorrow night, Wednesday, December 4th at 6:30 p.m. in the Friends of the Library room. Past Mayor Carl Jacobson and myself will be there representing the city, and I'm sure there'll be a few residents, but if we could have more residents, that would be fantastic. Anybody who has any questions about the Hyperion, anyone who lives in the general vicinity of the Hyperion and want to know about the noises that are coming from the Hyperion or the scents that are coming from the Hyperion or the mosquito counts coming out of the Hyperion, this is the place that you would find that out, and this is a meeting that is put on for your benefit that quarterly. So again, it's tomorrow night, Wednesday, December 4th, 6:30 p.m. in the Friends of the Library room.
Thank you, sir. All right. Councilmember Brand.
Yeah, I just want to make an observation. I've been watching for the last year or so Sacramento, and our new governor, and we're seeing, and we talked about it a few times tonight, the one-size-fits-all legislation that's coming across California, and I expect there'll be more of that. We haven't really had the conversation that I wanted to each of the last 4 years about whether it made any sense to have residential life east of PCH. My take on it is there's going to be residential life east of PCH, whether we think it's a good idea or not. It's going to be put on us by Sacramento. And you've seen Exhibit A, the ADU, just recently. They overrode local control and jammed it in all across the state. They'll do the same thing with eastern El Segundo. And I would suggest that you have that conversation going forward and get out in front of it so that you can control it and make it the way you want it before you're ordered to have it be a certain way. That's what I think is going to happen in the next few years, and we're already seeing many evidences of it. We spent a lot of time here tonight talking about the rent control issues. It was the ADUs before that, short-term rentals before that. The residents east of PCH are coming, I'm pretty sure, and I think you shouldn't avoid another year talking about that and seeing what the advantages and disadvantages of it are, because they're moving pretty fast in Sacramento. While we were kicking around the ADUs, they just rode right over it all. You don't have a governor that values local control like you did. So that's just an observation. Also, another observation is the boundaries for El Segundo are a pretty sad mess. On each side of us, the north side, that's pretty infamous, right? Terrible, dismal, a disgrace. We're not looking so good, though, on the west side, on the south side, and we're looking terrible down Aviation Boulevard on the east side. Hopefully the Greenway project can address that in the years to come. We really don't have pretty boundaries. You come down El Segundo Boulevard like a lot of people do from the freeway. They go under a rusty bridge that overhangs. It doesn't say welcome to El Segundo, and on the way out, thanks for visiting. It's just ugly. And why can't we get that, painted with a nice message? But all the boundaries around here, and the boundaries probably aren't even set right, especially the one on the east should probably be a half mile further east, but they're ugly. And it's a project to work on so that we have a more desirable looking town to come into, whether it's our fault or not. If you noticed around LAX, they spent a lot of money perfecting the embankments on the way through the tunnel. Before you go to the tunnel and after, they had guys up there for months planting, and it's pretty rich. But they're basically giving the finger to the city of El Segundo on their south side. And people are assuming, that we have something to do with that. We don't even seem to be able to get it put right and kept right. They're such bad neighbors. So these kinds of things aren't new, but I expect they're going to continue unless some different strategies are adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. Mayor Pro Tem.
I just wanted to thank the ESVP. Once again, we had a luncheon this week to thank the people that volunteer to help police our streets. So thank you to all of them. And I wanted to let people know that Chin Chin's is open, and the Butcher, the Baker, and the Cappuccino Maker. So another great 2 restaurants that have opened up in town. So please they're located right next to Jackson's by ArcLight Theaters.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, I'll be quick. We had a win with the Council of Governments recently as a city, where we were able to get Metro to acknowledge the Park Place project as use as a legitimate use of Measure Our funds for the first time in writing. And we also got a little over $5 million for design funding for that project. So congrats, Ken and Scott and everyone that worked on that. That's amazing. Good stuff. And we have a tree lighting ceremony Thursday, December 5th. So it starts at 3:30. Is that right, Scott? Barbara, 3:30 to 5:30 are the festivities. And we also have the chamber mixer going on that evening. So that'll be really exciting. And of course, the parade, as we heard about, we'll all be in. Some of us will be in it twice in one day. Yeah, unfortunately. All right, city attorney.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Thank you. City manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the next council meeting will be on the 17th. We'll take a look at the urgency ordinance issue as well. I have some thoughts on that, but we'll follow up on that. The reference to the Candy Cane Lane event, I heard December 16th, staff has reminded me it starts on December 14th, but that's on the city's website, so I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's go to public communications. Now's the time and place, public communications.
I just want to give a little clarity on the emergency ordinance. It's not necessarily a situation where we're just withholding the inevitable. For example, my building was sold a month ago. The new buyer has not put it back up for sale. And my neighbor and I double checked to make sure it wasn't just the old thing that we saw before, the previous owner selling. It's a new sale. So if the emergency ordinance were to take effect protecting me for January, then the new owner couldn't evict me just based on he wants to sell it. He could sell it with me in the property, and then maybe the new owner who purchased it again could do that, but I can't presume what that person's intentions are. And if they do want to completely renovate, it's a substantial renovation, which means it's not just paint and fresh paint and new carpet. It's permits that are required. It's substantial. So it's not, I just want to clarify that it's that it's not just, I mean, I could have a chance to potentially stay there for a significant amount of time longer, which is why I'm here. If I thought, in 2 months, no matter what, I have to move, then I would be definitely looking for other options. But that's why I'm here because this could help my situation a lot, and other people as well who aren't here that I'm representing. That's all.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Powell. Appreciate it.
Mayor Boyles and city council members, thank you for your time. I'll try and keep this real short. I'm also caught up in the no fault evictions, and I applaud you all for jumping on this so quickly. I know it was over the Thanksgiving weekend, but we really appreciate your time and efforts, and for setting up a special meeting this week to try and address it. And I just want to make one quick point. That we've talked to some specific landlord-tenant attorneys, BASTA, if you're familiar with them, the Eviction Defense Network. We've talked with them, and they said our best defense is if our city passes emergency ordinance. And so I'd again like to ask your assistance in passing this emergency ordinance, and leave it up to the individual renters, their individual tenants, and their personal lawyers to decide if they want to take the risk and take it to court or not. But this emergency ordinance will give us a foundation to stand upon. And so again, thank you for your time and attention, and thank you for your passion in trying to help your residents.
Thank you. Could you state your name, please?
I'm sorry, Seth Lewis.
Thank you. Okay, looks like that's it for public communications. We are adjourned. Yes, sir.
If we're going to try to put together a special meeting, we're all here now. It's hard for Mashia to track us all down. Why don't we just have her work with us right now and see if we can put something together got to be 24 hours from now at the earliest. But it's easier because tomorrow you'll spend, what, 2 hours trying to find the 5 of us. He said that, oh, that won't work for her, you know.
Okay, good. So we'll adjourn and then we'll get with Ms. Shea real quickly, if it's allowable by the city attorney. Thank you.
Just